cold barrel of Big Al McGrady's pistol pressed against Clara Whitmore's temple as her stepfather counted blood money at the kitchen table. 20 head of cattle, and she's yours, he said, not even looking at his stepdaughter. In that moment, Clara understood she wasn't a daughter, she was livestock to be sold. Tonight, she would either escape Red Rock forever or die trying. This is a story of survival, betrayal, and unexpected love in the unforgiving American frontier. Stay with me until the end, and comment your city below. I'd love to know how far this tale has traveled. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 11 each chime, echoing through the Whitmore house like a funeral bell. Clara pressed her ear against the rough wooden door of her room, listening to the sounds that would determine whether she lived free or died in chains. Downstairs, bottles clinked against glasses as her stepfather Samuel Whitmore entertained his guest, the man who had come to collect her like a prized mare. "She's spirited, I'll grant you that." Big Al McGrady's voice boomed through the floorboards, thick with whiskey and entitlement. "But I've broken wilder fillies. Give me 3 months, and she'll be as docile as a lamb." Clara's fingers trembled as she tied the last of her meager possessions into her mother's old carpet bag. 2 dresses, a photograph of her real father, the silver locket her mother had pressed into her palm before the fever took her, and 43 cents she'd saved by taking in secret mending work. It wasn't much to start a new life, but it was more than she'd have as Big Al's property. "The girl's got her mother's looks," Samuel slurred, and Clara could picture him perfectly slouched in Papa's old chair, the one he'd claimed the day after the funeral, his greasy hair falling across his bloodshot eyes. "Elizabeth was a beauty god, rest her soul. Died 2 winters back, left me with the burden of raising her daughter." "Burden?" Big Al repeated with a laugh that made Clara's skin crawl. "Well, I'll be taking that burden off your hands come morning. My ranch needs a woman's touch, and my bed's been cold too long." The casual way they discussed her fate, as if she were a piece of furniture to be bartered, ignited something fierce in Clara's chest. She thought of her mother, Elizabeth Whitmore, who had survived 20 years on the frontier, who had taught Clara to shoot, to ride, to read the weather in cloud formations. Her mother would have put a bullet in both men before letting them sell her daughter like chattel. Clara moved to the window, easing it open inch by careful inch. The October wind bit at her face, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Below the ground looked impossibly far, but the old oak tree her father had planted on her 5th birthday stretched its arms toward her window like an old friend offering help. "What if she runs?" Samuel asked downstairs, and Clara froze. "Let her try," Big Al responded. "Where's a 19-year-old girl gonna go? Every town within 100 miles knows my brand. Anyone who helps her will answer to me. Besides, you've got her locked up tight, don't you?" "Course I do. Barred her door myself after supper." Clara almost laughed. Samuel had been so drunk he'd forgotten to actually secure the bar. It was still leaning against the hallway wall where he'd left it, another task abandoned in favor of the bottle. She pulled on her father's old riding coat, the only thing of his Samuel hadn't sold, and secured the carpetbag across her shoulders. The photograph of her parents on their wedding day went into the pocket closest to her heart. Then, with a whispered prayer to whoever might be listening, Clara swung her leg over the windowsill. The oak tree groaned under her weight, but held. She'd climbed this tree 1,000 times as a child, knew every branch and foothold like the lines on her palm. But never in darkness, never with the stakes so high. Halfway down, her boot slipped on dew-slicked bark. For one heart-stopping moment, she dangled by her fingertips, the ground spinning below. "You're Elizabeth Whitmore's daughter," she whispered to herself, finding her foothold again. "You're made of stronger stuff than fear." When her boots finally touched earth, Clara didn't allow herself a moment of relief. The stable was 50 yards away, and every second counted. She crept through the shadows, grateful for the new moon that cloaked her movements in darkness. Her father's horse, Apollo, nickered softly as she approached. The paint stallion was the only valuable thing Samuel hadn't sold, probably because the horse had nearly killed him the one time he'd tried to ride it. But Apollo remembered Clara remembered the sugar cubes and gentle words, the long rides across the desert, when her world had been whole. "Hey, boy," she whispered, running her hand along his neck. "Ready to run." She saddled him with practiced efficiency, her fingers finding buckles and straps by memory alone. From the storage room, she grabbed a canteen, a coil of rope, and after a moment's hesitation, her father's old Colt 45 from its hiding place behind the feed bags. The gun was heavy in her hands, heavier with the knowledge that she might have to use it. As she led Apollo from the stable, voices erupted from the house. "Where's my whiskey?" Big Al roared. "Samuel, you promised me the good stuff." "In the cellar," Samuel replied. "I'll fetch it." Clara's blood turned to ice. The cellar door was directly beside the stable. She swung onto Apollo's back, abandoning stealth for speed. The stallion, sensing her urgency, burst from the yard in a thunder of hooves, just as Samuel emerged from the house with a lantern. "The girl!" he shouted. "She's taking the horse!" Clara leaned low over Apollo's neck, urging him faster, as shouts erupted behind her. A gunshot cracked through the night, the bullet whistling past her ear. Then another and another. But Apollo was already stretching into his full gallop, eating up the ground with powerful strides. "Ride, boy," Clara whispered into the wind. "Ride like the devil himself is chasing us." Because, in a way, he was. The town of Red Rock disappeared behind them, swallowed by darkness and distance. Clara didn't look back. There was nothing there for her now except chains and compromised bruises and brutal ownership. Ahead lay the desert, vast and unforgiving, but also free. And freedom, even with all its dangers, was better than the certain doom that waited in Big Al McGrady's house. As the hours passed and the adrenaline faded, the reality of her situation began to sink in. She was alone in the New Mexico desert with limited supplies, no clear destination, and some of the most dangerous men in the territory hunting her. The October night was cold enough to see her breath, and come daylight the sun would be merciless. But Clara had made her choice. She thought of her mother's last words, "Promise me, Clara, promise you'll never let anyone break your spirit." "I promise, Mama," Clara whispered to the stars. Dawn came slowly, painting the desert in shades of rose and gold. Clara had put perhaps 20 miles between herself and Red Rock, following an old Apache trail her father had shown her years ago. Apollo was lathered with sweat, his breathing heavy. They needed water rest and a plan. She found a small canyon with a trickle of spring water and some shade from a cluster of cottonwoods. As Apollo drank, Clara took stock of her situation. The canteen was already half empty. She had no food. The territory stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and deadly. "What have I done?" she asked the morning sky. But even as doubt crept in, she knew the answer. She had chosen. For the first time in her life, she had made a choice that was entirely her own. It might lead to death, but at least it would be her death on her terms. As the sun climbed higher, Clara allowed herself to rest against a boulder, the Colt heavy in her lap. She thought about the stories her father used to tell about pioneers and mountain men, about people who carved lives from nothing but determination and grit. "You come from strong stock," he'd said. "Never forget that." A sound made her freeze horses approaching from the east. Multiple horses. Clara's heart hammered as she pressed herself against the rock, pulling Apollo deeper into the shadows of the canyon. Through a gap in the rocks, she could see riders approaching, 5 of them, moving with the easy confidence of men who owned the land they rode. But they weren't Big Al's men. These riders were leaner, harder, with the look of men who lived outside the law. As they drew closer, Clara could make out their faces, scarred, weathered, dangerous. The lead rider, a man with a black beard and cold eyes, raised his hand, bringing the group to a halt. "Water here," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the still morning air. "We'll rest the horses." Clara held her breath, her finger on the trigger of the Colt. If they found her a lone woman with a valuable horse, she knew what would happen. These weren't the type of men who respected anything but force. Apollo, stressed and tired, chose that moment to shift his weight, his hoof striking stone with a clear, ringing sound. The black-bearded man's head snapped toward their hiding spot. "Someone's here," he said quietly, drawing his gun with practiced ease. "Come on out nice and slow. We ain't looking for trouble, but we'll surely give it if needed." Clara's mind raced. She couldn't outrun them, not with Apollo exhausted. She couldn't outfight 5 armed men. But maybe, just maybe, she could outthink them. "I'm coming out," she called, making her voice as steady as she could manage. "I'm armed, but I don't want to fight." She emerged slowly, the Colt visible but not raised Apollo's reins in her other hand. The 5 men stared at her with surprise that quickly shifted to something more predatory. "Well, well," the leader said, a grin spreading across his face. "What's a pretty little thing like you doing out here all alone? Heading to Tucson, Clara lied smoothly. My husband's waiting for me there. He's a marshal. The men exchanged glances, clearly skeptical. A marshal's wife riding alone through Apache country. The leader dismounted, moving closer. That's a strange story, miss. Not miss, Clara said firmly. Mrs. Carver. Mrs. Luke Carver. She didn't know where the name came from, but something about it made the men pause. The leader's eyes narrowed. Luke Carver. The Luke Carver. Clara had no idea who Luke Carver was, but she nodded anyway. That's right. Boss, one of the other men said nervously. If she's really Carver's woman. Shut up, the leader snapped, but Clara could see uncertainty in his eyes now. Whoever Luke Carver was, his name carried weight even among outlaws. My husband will be looking for me, Clara continued, pressing her advantage. He expected me yesterday. By now he's probably got half the territory out searching. The leader studied her for a long moment. You got any proof you're who you say you are? Clara's mind raced. Then with steady hands she pulled out the photograph of her parents. This was our wedding day, she said, handing it over. The man barely glanced at it. A young couple from 20 years ago could have been anyone. But the confidence in Clara's voice, the steadiness of her gaze sold the lie. All right, Mrs. Carver, he said finally, handing back the photograph. We'll be on our way, but a word of advice next time, wait for your husband's escort. These are dangerous lands for a woman alone. As the outlaws mounted up and rode away, Clara's knees nearly buckled with relief. But she'd learned something valuable in this lawless land. Sometimes a name could be more powerful than a gun. She waited until the riders were completely out of sight before collapsing against Apollo's side, her whole body shaking. We did it, boy, she whispered. We survived. But she knew this was just the beginning. Big Al wouldn't give up easily, and now she'd claimed to be the wife of someone named Luke Carver, a man whose name made hardened outlaws think twice. She needed to find out who he was, and more importantly, make sure their paths never crossed. As the sun climbed toward noon, Clara mounted Apollo again and continued west deeper into the desert. The landscape changed from red rock to white sand, from scattered juniper to sparse creosote. The beauty was stark and unforgiving, like freedom itself. By late afternoon, both she and Apollo were struggling. The water from the canyon was long gone, and the October sun, while not as brutal as summer, was still strong enough to sap their strength. Clara's lips were cracked, her throat parched. Apollo's head hung low, his steps becoming unsteady. Just a little further, she promised him, though she had no idea if that was true. As if in answer to her desperate hope, she spotted something in the distance, a dark smudge against the pale sand that might be vegetation. Vegetation meant water. She urged Apollo toward it, each step an effort of will. It was further than it looked. Everything in the desert was, but finally they reached a small oasis of green. A natural spring bubbled from between rocks, feeding a pool, no bigger than a washtub, but to Clara it looked like paradise. She let Apollo drink first, knowing that without him she had no chance of survival. Only when he'd had his fill did she drop to her knees and cup the precious water to her lips. It tasted of minerals and earth, and it was the most delicious thing she'd ever experienced. As she refilled the canteen, Clara heard it, the distant sound of horses. Many horses. Her heart sank. Somehow Big Al's men had tracked her. She looked around desperately for cover, but the oasis was exposed, visible from all directions. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. Apollo was too exhausted for another chase. This was it then. This was where her bid for freedom would end. Clara checked the Colt's 6 bullets. Not enough to fight off a posse, but maybe enough to ensure they didn't take her alive. She'd rather die free than live in captivity. The riders crested a rise, and Clara could see them clearly now. 8 men armed and ready. But wait, the man in the lead wasn't Big Al. This rider sat his horse differently, moved with a different kind of authority. As they approached, Clara raised the Colt, not pointing it at anyone specific, but making it clear she was armed and ready to use it. That's close enough, she called when they were within earshot. The lead rider raised his hand, bringing the group to a halt. He dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. As he walked closer, Clara got her first good look at him. He was perhaps 35, lean and weathered like leather left in the sun. His eyes were the color of sage, sharp and intelligent. There was something in the way he moved, controlled dangerous, but not cruel. This was a man who had seen violence and chosen to walk away from it, though it still clung to him like a shadow. "Ma'am," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "I'm not here to hurt you." "Funny thing for a man to say when he's brought 7 armed friends," Clara replied, keeping the gun steady. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Fair point. Name's Luke Carver. I'm looking for my wife." Clara's blood turned to ice. Of all the names she could have chosen, all the lies she could have told, she'd picked his. The real Luke Carver stood before her, and behind him were 7 men who knew she was a fraud. "I don't know what you mean," she said, but her voice shook. Luke Carver studied her with those sage green eyes. "Word travels fast in the desert, ma'am. 5 outlaws rode into Culverson this morning, spooked as hell, saying they'd met Mrs. Luke Carver on the trail. Thing is, I've never been married." Clara's mind raced looking for another lie, another escape, but found nothing. She was trapped. "Now," Luke continued, his voice gentle but firm, "those outlaws Amos Pike's gang, they're bad men, the kind who would have hurt you if they hadn't been afraid of me. So I figure you must have been in a pretty desperate situation to use my name. Question is, what kind of trouble are you running from that's worse than facing down Pike's gang alone?" Before Clara could answer, dust appeared on the eastern horizon. Another group of riders moving fast. Luke turned to look, then back at Clara. "Let me guess. Those would be the men you're running from." Clara nodded, her throat too tight for words. Luke Carver made a decision that would change both their lives. "Then I suppose you'd better come with us, Mrs. Carver," he said, emphasizing the last 2 words. "After all, can't have my wife standing out here alone when trouble comes calling." Clara stared at him in shock. "Why would you?" "Because any woman brave enough to face down Amos Pike's gang with nothing but grit and a clever lie deserves a chance," he said. "And because I've got a feeling that whoever's chasing you needs to be stopped. Mount up. We ride for Culverson." One of Luke's men, a grizzled older cowboy, rode forward leading an extra horse. For the lady boss. Clara looked at the approaching dust cloud, then at Luke Carver's steady gaze. She was trading one uncertain situation for another, but something in this man's eyes told her she could trust him, at least for now. She mounted the fresh horse, Apollo's reins tied to her saddle. As they rode out, Luke fell in beside her. "We'll need to make your story true enough to stick," he said quietly. "When we get to town, you are my wife. We were married last month in Silver City. You were traveling to meet me when you got separated from your escort. Understood?" "Why are you helping me?" Clara asked. Luke was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the horizon. "Maybe because I know what it's like to run from something. Maybe because I've seen too many women hurt by men who think they own them. Or maybe because anyone who can bluff Amos Pike deserves a second chance." They rode hard for an hour, the pursuing riders falling behind, but never giving up completely. As they crested a ridge, the town of Culverson appeared below, a rough collection of buildings clinging to existence in the harsh landscape. "Listen carefully," Luke said as they approached the town. "Culverson is my territory. The sheriff is a friend, the judge owes me favors, and most folks here respect me or fear me enough not to ask too many questions. But if those men chasing you have legal claim—" "They don't," Clara interrupted. "My stepfather tried to sell me to a man named Big Al McGrady, like I was property, like I was cattle." Luke's jaw tightened. "Big Al McGrady from Red Rock. You know him, know of him. He's killed 3 wives already, all of them dying of accidents once he got tired of them." Luke's voice was cold as winter stone. "Your stepfather tried to sell you to that monster." Clara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Then we make our stand here," Luke declared. "Boys, when we hit town, spread the word. Anyone tries to take my wife will answer to me personally." As they rode down Main Street, Clara noticed how people stopped to stare. Women whispered behind their hands. Men touched their hat brims respectfully to Luke, and children ran alongside their horses. Luke Carver was clearly someone of importance here, someone with a reputation that commanded respect. They stopped at a 2-story building marked Hotel Culverson. Luke dismounted and helped Clara down, playing the part of the attentive husband perfectly. "Martha," he called to a plump woman emerging from the hotel. "This is my wife Clara. She's had a difficult journey. Could you see that she gets a room and a hot bath?" Martha's eyes widened with surprise, but she recovered quickly. Of course, Mr. Carver. Right this way, Mrs. Carver. As Clara followed Martha inside, she heard horses thundering into town. Through the window, she saw Big Al McGrady and 6 of his men riding down Main Street. Her stepfather Samuel was with them, looking haggard and angry. Luke stood in the middle of the street, his men flanking him, waiting. "Carver," Big Al shouted, dismounting heavily, "you've got something that belongs to me." "I don't recall taking anything of yours, McGrady," Luke replied calmly. "That girl, the one claiming to be your wife. Her stepfather sold her to me fair and square. I've got a bill of sale right here." Big Al pulled out a piece of paper, waving it like a weapon. Luke didn't even glance at it. "Last I checked, McGrady, this was still the United States of America. We don't buy and sell people here. War was fought over that, if you recall." "She's his legal ward," Big Al insisted. "He has the right to arrange her marriage." "She's 19, but," Luke countered, "of legal age to make her own decisions. And she's made hers. She's my wife." Samuel Whitmore pushed forward, his face red with drink and rage. "That's a lie. She ran off last night. There's no way she could have married you." Luke smiled a dangerous expression that made several onlookers step back. "You calling me a liar?" "Whitmore?" From the hotel window, Clara watched the confrontation with her heart in her throat. Luke was risking everything for her, a stranger who had stolen his name and brought trouble to his door. "I want to see her," Big Al demanded. "Let her tell me herself that she's your wife." Luke turned toward the hotel, his eyes finding Clara in the window. The question in his gaze was clear: did she want to face them or let him handle it? Clara made her decision. She walked out of the hotel, her head high, and stood beside Luke. "I'm here, Mr. McGrady." "You little thief," Samuel snarled. "You stole my horse." "The horse was my father's," Clara said steadily. "You stole everything else he left me. I only took what was mine." "And you're mine." Big Al stepped forward aggressively. "Bought and paid for." Luke moved so smoothly it was like water flowing. Suddenly, he was between Clara and Big Al, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol. "Touch my wife, McGrady, and it'll be the last thing you ever do." The tension in the street was thick enough to cut. Hands hovered near weapons, everyone waiting to see who would make the first move. Then the sheriff arrived, a tall man with careful eyes and a badge that caught the afternoon sun. "What seems to be the trouble here?" "Sheriff Watson, fuss," Big Al said quickly. "This woman is legally mine. Her guardian sold her to me. I have the papers." Sheriff Watson looked at Luke, then at Clara, then back at Big Al. "Mrs. Carver, is it true your stepfather arranged a marriage for you?" Clara lifted her chin. "He tried to sell me, Sheriff, like I was livestock. I refused and left of my own free will. I'm of legal age, and I've chosen my own husband." "She wasn't free to choose," Samuel protested. "She was under my protection." "Protection." Clara's voice rose with years of suppressed anger. "You drank away everything my father built. You hit my mother when she tried to stop you. After she died, you tried to come into my room at night until I started barring the door. That's your idea of protection." The crowd that had gathered murmured at this revelation. Several women looked at Samuel with disgust. "Sounds to me like the lady made a sensible choice," Sheriff Watson said. "And unless you can prove she's not of legal age or that she's been coerced by Mr. Carver here, I don't see that you have any claim on her." "This isn't over." Big Al growled, his face dark with rage. "You can't just steal what's mine, Carver." "I haven't stolen anything," Luke replied calmly. "But you try to take my wife, and I'll show you what stealing really costs." For a moment, violence seemed inevitable. Then Big Al seemed to remember where he was in Luke Carver's town, surrounded by Luke Carver's men facing Luke Carver himself. The odds were not in his favor. "Come on," he said to his men. "We're leaving, but this isn't finished." As they mounted up and rode out, Samuel turned back to Clara. "You're no daughter of mine," he spat. "Your mother would be ashamed." "My mother would have shot you herself if she'd lived to see what you became," Clara replied quietly. When the dust settled and the crowd dispersed, Clara found herself alone with Luke in front of the hotel. The weight of everything that had happened, the escape, the fear, the confrontation suddenly crashed over her, and she swayed on her feet. Luke caught her elbow, steadying her. "You did well," he said quietly. Took courage to face them like that. I don't even know how to thank you, Clara began, but Luke shook his head. We're not out of danger yet. Big Al won't give up that easily. He'll be back probably with more men, maybe with a judge in his pocket. We need to make this marriage real, at least on paper. Clara stared at him. You mean... I mean, we need to see Judge Morrison and make it official. It's the only way to protect you legally. We can have it annulled later once the danger's passed. But why would you do this for a stranger? Luke was quiet for a moment, looking out at the desert beyond the town. Maybe you're not the only one running from something, Mrs. Carver. Maybe having a wife, even a temporary one, solves some problems for me too. Before Clara could ask what he meant, he was already walking toward the courthouse. Come on, Judge Morrison doesn't like to work past sunset and we're burning daylight. The courthouse stood at the end of Main Street, a modest wooden building that had seen better days. Judge Morrison was indeed still there, a thin man with spectacles perched on the end of his nose, sorting through papers by lamplight. He looked up in surprise when Luke and Clara entered. Luke Carver, he said, setting down his pen. Haven't seen you in my courthouse for months. Usually means you're keeping out of trouble or making it where I can't see it. Need a favor, Judge, Luke said without preamble. This is Clara Whitmore. We need to be married. Tonight. Judge Morrison's eyebrows rose nearly to his receding hairline. The same Clara Whitmore that Big Al McGrady was just hollering about in the street, the one he claims belongs to him. The very same, Luke confirmed. And she belongs to no one but herself. We're here to make that clear, legal and binding. The judge studied them both, his sharp eyes taking in Clara's dusty clothes, her exhausted face, the way she stood close to Luke but not quite touching. This is highly irregular, Luke. There are usually notices to be posted, waiting periods to be observed. We don't have time for usual, Luke replied. Big Al will be back probably with legal backing from Red Rock. We need this done proper before he returns. Judge Morrison removed his spectacles, cleaning them slowly while he thought. Clara, is it? Step forward, young lady. Clara moved closer to the desk, meeting the judge's gaze steadily. Are you here of your own free will? He asked. Is Luke Carver forcing you into this marriage? No, sir, Clara answered firmly. Mr. Carver is helping me. My stepfather tried to sell me to Big Al McGrady against my will. This marriage is my choice. And you understand what marriage means? The legal implications, the binding nature of the contract. Clara hesitated for just a moment, glancing at Luke, who nodded encouragingly. I understand, Judge Morrison. The judge sighed, putting his spectacles back on. I've known Luke Carver for 5 years. He's a hard man, some would say dangerous, but I've never known him to harm a woman or break his word. If he says he'll protect you, he will. He pulled out a marriage certificate. But I need to know this isn't just some scheme. Marriage is sacred even when it's done in haste. Judge, Luke said quietly, you know what Big Al did to his last 3 wives? You want that on your conscience? Morrison's face darkened. No, I don't. All right, I'll do it. But I need witnesses, 2 of them. Luke went to the door and called out. Within minutes, 2 of his men entered the grizzled, older cowboy Clara had seen earlier, introduced as Walt and a younger man named Tommy, who couldn't stop staring at Clara with awe. Right then, Judge Morrison said, standing and pulling on his formal coat, let's make this legal. Stand together, please. Clara and Luke stood side by side before the judge's desk. She could feel the heat radiating from Luke's body, smell the leather and sage scent of him. Her heart was racing, but not entirely from fear anymore. We are gathered here, such as we are to witness the marriage of Luke Carver and Clara Whitmore. Judge Morrison began, his voice taking on a formal cadence. These are unusual circumstances, but the law is the law, and love finds its way in mysterious paths. Clara almost laughed at the mention of love. She'd known this man for less than a day, but as Judge Morrison continued with the ceremony, she stole glances at Luke's profile. The strong jaw, the lines around his eyes that suggested he'd smiled once upon a time before something had hardened him. Luke Carver. Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to protect and cherish in sickness and health for as long as you both shall live? I do, Luke said, his voice steady and sure. Clara Whitmore. Do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to honor and trust in good times and bad for as long as you both shall live? Clara's throat was dry. This was supposed to be temporary, a legal fiction to protect her from Big Al. But standing here with Luke's men as witnesses and the judge's solemn words filling the small room, it felt real. It felt like a choice that would change everything. "I do," she whispered. Then, stronger, "I do." "The rings?" Judge Morrison asked. Luke pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band that had been worn smooth by years of use. "It was my mother's," he said quietly to Clara. "You can wear it until we sort this out." His fingers were gentle as he slipped it onto her hand. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Judge Morrison said. "Luke, you may kiss your bride." Clara's eyes widened. She hadn't thought about this part. Luke leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Just for show," he whispered, then pressed his lips briefly to hers. The kiss was quick, proper, but Clara felt it like lightning down to her toes. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Carver," Judge Morrison said, signing the certificate with a flourish. "May God have mercy on you both." As they left the courthouse, now legally bound, Clara tried to process what had just happened. In the span of 24 hours, she'd gone from being sold like cattle to being married to a stranger who might be her salvation or her doom. "The hotel's not safe," Luke said as they walked. "Big Al knows you're there. You'll stay at my place tonight." "Your place?" Clara's voice came out higher than intended. "I have a ranch outside town. Dozen men there who work for me. You'll be protected." He must have seen the fear in her eyes, because he added, "You'll have your own room. This marriage is for your protection, nothing more. I'm not Big Al McGrady." They retrieved Apollo and Clara's few belongings from the hotel. As they rode out of town, the sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. Luke's ranch was 5 miles north, nestled in a valley with good water and natural protection from the surrounding ridges. The main house was larger than Clara had expected, built of adobe and timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. It spoke of prosperity, but not ostentation, strength, rather than show. Men emerged from the bunkhouse as they arrived, curious about their boss's sudden bride. "Boys," Luke addressed them, "this is Mrs. Carver. Anyone who disrespects her or fails to protect her will answer to me. Understood?" A chorus of "Yes, boss" rang out, and Clara saw the respect these hard men had for Luke. Whatever else he was a leader they trusted. Inside the house was surprisingly well appointed. Native rugs covered the floors, good furniture filled the rooms, and books, dozens of books, lined shelves in what appeared to be Luke's study. "You read?" Clara asked, surprised. "When I have time," Luke replied, showing her upstairs. "Your room." He opened a door to reveal a spacious bedroom with windows facing the mountains. It was clean, comfortable, with feminine touches that seemed out of place. Lace curtains, a vanity with a mirror, a quilt that looked hand-stitched with roses. Luke noticed her looking. It was prepared for someone else. Long ago. It's never been used. His voice was tight with old pain. "I'll have Rosa bring you hot water for a bath. Supper's at 7. He left before Clara could ask about the someone else, the woman this room had been waiting for. Rosa turned out to be a motherly Mexican woman who ran Luke's household with warm efficiency. She brought not just hot water, but clean clothes, simple but well-made dresses that fit surprisingly well. "Senor Luke, he is a good man," Rosa said as she helped Clara wash the desert dust from her hair. "Lonely man, but good. You are the first woman he brings here. It's not what you think," Clara started to explain. Rosa smiled knowingly. "Love comes in many ways, senora. Sometimes it starts with kindness in the desert." At dinner, Clara sat across from Luke at a long table that could have seated a dozen. The awkwardness was palpable. They were married strangers, bound by law, but nothing else. "Tell me about Big Al McGrady," Luke said finally. "Everything you know." Clara set down her fork. "He owns the largest ranch in Red Rock. They say he has connections all the way to the governor's office. His first wife died in a fall from a horse. Witnesses said the horse had been beaten bloody before she mounted it. The second drowned in a creek that was only knee-deep. The third fell down the stairs and broke her neck, and no one investigated. Who would dare? He owns the law in Red Rock. My stepfather owed him gambling debts. I was the payment. Clara's hands clenched in her lap. My mother would have killed him herself if she'd known what Samuel would become after she died. How did she die? Fever 2 winters ago. She was strong, but the winter was harder. No money for a doctor because Samuel had drunk it all away. Clara's voice was steady, but Luke could see the pain in her eyes. She made me promise to stay strong to survive. I tried, but when Samuel started coming to my door at night— You don't have to explain, Luke said quietly. You did what you had to do. What about you? Clara asked. Rosa said, I'm the first woman you've brought here, but that room— Luke's jaw tightened. He was quiet so long Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, her name was Margaret. We were engaged. She was traveling here from Missouri to marry me when her stagecoach was robbed. She didn't survive. I'm sorry, Clara whispered. It was 3 years ago. The men who did it are dead now. The way he said it made Clara shiver. There was darkness in Luke Carver, carefully controlled, but never far from the surface. Is that why you helped me because of her? Luke considered the question. Maybe. Or maybe I just recognize a fighter when I see one. You faced down Amos Pike's gang alone. That takes courage most men don't have. Or desperation, Clara countered. Sometimes they're the same thing. After dinner, Luke showed her around the house, explaining the routines, introducing her to the hands who would be on guard through the night. She was a stranger in his world, but he was making space for her in it carefully, deliberately. I should teach you to shoot properly, sir, he said as they stood on the porch, looking out at the star-filled sky. That Colt you were carrying, do you know how to use it? My father taught me the basics. I can hit what I aim at most of the time. Most of the time isn't good enough when your life depends on it. We'll start tomorrow. Clara nodded, then asked the question that had been bothering her all evening. What happens when Big Al comes back, because we both know he will? Then we face him, Luke said simply. He's dangerous, but he's also arrogant. He'll make mistakes. We just need to be ready when he does. And when the danger's past, the marriage— We'll deal with that when the time comes, Luke said. But something in his voice suggested he was no more certain about that future than she was. That night, Clara lay in the bed meant for another woman wearing a nightgown that might have been Margaret's, protected by a man she'd married but didn't know. Through her window, she could see guards patrolling, their shadows moving in the moonlight. She was safer than she'd been in years, but safety, she was learning, was its own kind of cage. A sound woke her near midnight horses approaching fast. Clara was at the window in an instant, her heart pounding. But it was only 2 of Luke's men returning from town, reporting to him on the porch below her window. Big Al's still in Culverson, she heard one say. Took rooms at the Comstock Hotel. He's been sending telegrams all evening. To who? Luke asked. Judge Harvey in Santa Fe. Word is Harvey owes Big Al favors from way back. Might be trying to get some kind of legal backing to overturn the marriage. Let him try, Luke said. Morrison's paperwork is solid, and Harvey's jurisdiction doesn't reach here. There's more boss. Big Al's been hiring men. Guns from Texas. Professional types. Luke was quiet for a moment. How many? Could be a dozen, could be more. They're not advertising their presence. Double the watch, Luke ordered. And send word to Sheriff Watson. If Big Al's building a private army, the law needs to know. Clara moved away from the window, her mouth dry. This was escalating beyond a simple dispute over an unwanted marriage. Men were going to die because she'd refused to be sold. The weight of that settled on her shoulders like a stone. The next morning, Luke was true to his word about shooting lessons. He set up targets behind the barn away from the main operations of the ranch. Clara had brought her father's Colt, and Luke examined it with professional interest. Good gun, he said. Well maintained. Your father knew what he was doing. He was in the cavalry before he met my mother, fought in the Indian Wars. That explains the horse. Apollo's got military training written all over him. Luke loaded the Colt, demonstrating. Watch how I stand. Your stance is everything. Feet shoulder width apart, weight balanced. He moved behind her, adjusting her position. His hands were professional, impersonal, but Clara was acutely aware of every point of contact. Now sight down the barrel. Don't jerk the trigger, squeeze it smooth like you're pressing water from a sponge. Clara fired, hitting the outer edge of the target. Better than most beginners, Luke acknowledged. Again. They spent 2 hours in the morning sun, Luke patiently correcting her form, teaching her to reload quickly to shoot from different positions. By the end, Clara was hitting center mass consistently. You're a natural, Luke said, and Clara felt absurdly pleased by his praise. But targets don't shoot back, remember that. As they walked back to the house, one of the ranch hands came running. Boss riders coming? Looks like Big Al and maybe 15 men. Luke's expression hardened. Get everyone to defensive positions. Clara, get in the house. I can help. You can help by staying alive, Luke said firmly. This is what I do. Let me do it. From the house's upper window, Clara watched the riders approach. Big Al was in the lead, flanked by hard-looking men she didn't recognize, the hired guns from Texas, she assumed. They stopped just outside the ranch's main gate. Carver, Big Al shouted. I've got a proposition for you. Luke walked out alone, though Clara could see his men positioned strategically around the property, rifles ready. I'm listening, McGrady. Simple business. That marriage of yours, it's inconvenient for both of us. You don't want trouble. I want what I paid for. So here's my offer, $10,000 for you to annul the marriage and hand over the girl. Clara gasped. $10,000 was more money than most men saw in a lifetime. Not interested, Luke replied without hesitation. 20,000, Big Al countered. McGrady, you could offer me all the gold in California and my answer would be the same. The lady is my wife. That's the end of it. You're making a mistake, Carver. I've got friends in high places. I can make life very difficult for you. You're welcome to try, Luke said calmly. But remember, I've got friends too, and unlike yours, mine don't care about money or politics. They care about loyalty. You come at me, you better come correct. Big Al's face was purple with rage. This isn't over. That girl cost me cattle and reputation. One way or another, I'll collect what I'm owed. The only thing you are owed is a bullet if you threaten my wife again, Luke said, his voice deadly quiet. Now get off my land before I forget my manners. For a tense moment, violence seemed inevitable. Hands hovered over weapons, horses shifted nervously. Then Big Al wheeled his mount around. Move out, he barked to his men. As they rode away, Clara saw him lean over to speak to one of the hired guns, a cold-faced man with dead eyes. Whatever he said made the gunman smile, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Luke returned to the house, finding Clara in the study. Pack what you need, he said without preamble. We're leaving. Leaving? But this is your home. And Big Al knows exactly where it is. Those men he's hired, I recognize some of them. They're not above burning the place down with us in it. Luke pulled down a saddlebag, filling it with ammunition. I've got a place in the mountains, harder to reach, easier to defend. We'll wait there until this plays out. What about your men, the ranch? Walt will manage things here. Most of the hands will come with us. The others will make sure the ranch keeps running. He paused, looking at her. I'm sorry, Clara. You traded one prison for another. No, Clara said firmly. In prison, you don't get choices. You've given me nothing but choices since we met. Luke studied her for a moment, something unreadable in his eyes. Get ready. We ride in an hour. The mountain retreat was a full day's ride through rough country. The trail was barely visible, winding through narrow canyons and across streams swollen with early snowmelt. Clara had thought herself a good rider, but keeping up with Luke and his men tested every skill she had. As they climbed higher, the air grew thin and cold. The desert gave way to pine forest, and the pine forest to bare rock and stubborn juniper. Finally, as the sun was setting, they reached their destination. A cluster of cabins built into the side of a cliff, virtually invisible until you were right on top of them. Welcome to the hideout, Walt said with a grin. Luke built this place after Margaret died. Figured a man in his line of work needed a bolt hole. Your line of work? Clara asked Luke. I wasn't always a rancher, say, Luke said shortly, dismounting. Come on, I'll show you your quarters. The cabins were surprisingly comfortable, built with defense in mind, but not sacrificing livability. Clara's room had a window that looked out over the valley below. Anyone approaching would be visible for miles. We could hold off an army from here, she observed. That's the idea, Luke confirmed. The question is whether Big Al is angry enough to become that army. Over the next 3 days, they settled into a strange routine. Luke continued Clara's shooting lessons, adding rifle work to her training. She helped with the cooking learning from Rosa, who had come with them. In the evenings, she and Luke would sit by the fire, not talking much, but growing comfortable with each other's silence. On the 4th day, Tommy rode in with news from town. Big Al's been busy, boss. He's got Judge Harvey coming from Santa Fe to review the marriage. Claims it's fraudulent that Clara was coerced. Harvey has no authority here, Luke said. Maybe not, but Big Al's also been spreading money around. Some of the town council are starting to ask questions about whether Sheriff Watson is doing his job. There's talk of bringing in a federal marshal to investigate. Luke's expression darkened. He's trying to make this bigger than it is. Force the law to pick a side. There's more, Tommy continued reluctantly. Big Al's been asking around about Margaret, about what happened to her. Luke went very still. Clara had never seen him truly angry before, but now she understood why men feared him. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. What's he playing at? Walt asked. He's trying to find leverage, Luke said, his voice controlled but tight. Something to use against me. He turned to Clara. This is going to get worse before it gets better. You should know that. I'm not going anywhere, Clara said quietly. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She wandered out onto the cabin's small porch, finding Luke already there, staring out at the stars. Tell me about Margaret, she said softly, sitting beside him. Luke was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, she was everything I wasn't. Gentle, educated, refined. Her father was a judge in Missouri. She could have married anyone, but she chose me. His voice was thick with memory. I was trying to go legitimate, leave my past behind. The ranch was going to be our fresh start. What was your past? Clara asked, though she thought she could guess. I was a gun for hire. Not proud of it, but not ashamed either. I had rules: no women, no children, only men who deserved it. Made good money, made enemies too. He paused. The men who killed Margaret weren't robbers. They were hunting me. She died because of who I was. Clara reached over and took his hand. It was the first time she'd touched him voluntarily since their brief kiss at the wedding. His hand was callous strong, and after a moment his fingers intertwined with hers. You didn't kill her, Clara said. They did. I hunted them down, Luke said quietly. All 6 of them. Took me 3 months. When I was done, I swore I'd never pick up a gun in anger again. He laughed bitterly. Now, here I am ready to fight a war over another woman who deserves better. I'm not Margaret, Clara said. I'm not gentle or refined. I'm a fighter like you said, and I made my choice. Luke turned to look at her, moonlight illuminating his weathered face. Why? Really, why trust me? You don't know me. Clara thought about it. My mother used to say you could tell everything about a man by how he treated those weaker than himself. You could have taken Big Al's money. You could have turned me over and walked away rich. Instead, you're here protecting a stranger, risking everything you've built. She squeezed his hand. That tells me all I need to know. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the stars wheel overhead. Neither of them acknowledged the growing connection between them, the way comfort was shifting towards something deeper. The next morning brought trouble with the dawn. One of the sentries spotted riders in the valley, too many to count, moving in formation toward their position. It's an army, Walt said grimly, lowering his field glasses. Maybe 30 men. Big Al's in the lead, and I see uniforms. He's brought federal marshals. How? Luke demanded. Tommy came running from his lookout position. Boss, there's more coming up the back trail. Another dozen at least. They were surrounded. Luke gathered his men quickly. Listen up. We're outnumbered 4-1. Anyone wants to leave, now's the time. No shame in it. Not a man moved. All right then, Luke said. Walt, take 5 men and cover the back trail. Tommy, get Clara to the stronghold, that fortified position we built into the cliff. The rest of you defensive positions. We don't shoot unless they shoot first. We're not outlaws here. I'm staying with you, Clara protested. No, Luke said firmly. Then softer. Please, Clara. I can't protect you and fight them at the same time. Let me know you're safe. Clara wanted to argue, but she saw the logic. She followed Tommy to the stronghold, a natural cave that had been reinforced with timber and stone. From there, she could see everything that was about to unfold. Big Al's force stopped just outside rifle range. A man in a federal marshal's uniform rode forward with a white flag. "Luke Carver," he called. "I'm Federal Marshal James Harrigan. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of kidnapping and forced marriage. Come out peacefully, and no one needs to die today." "Since when is marriage a federal crime, Marshal?" Luke called back. "Since you forced an innocent girl into it to prevent her legal guardian from arranging a proper match," Harrigan replied. "We have testimony from Samuel Whitmore and Albert McGrady that you've coerced Miss Whitmore against her will." "That's a lie," Clara shouted from her position before anyone could stop her. "I married Luke Carver of my own free will. My stepfather tried to sell me to Big Al McGrady, like property. Luke protected me." Marshal Harrigan looked up at her position. "Ma'am, I need you to come down here so we can sort this out properly." "Don't you move," Luke ordered Clara, then addressed the marshal. "You want to sort this out. Show me your warrant. Show me what judge signed it and on what evidence." Harrigan hesitated, and in that hesitation Luke found his answer. "You don't have a warrant, do you? Big Al just convinced you to ride along with promises of glory or gold." "I have a witness who says you murdered 6 men 3 years ago," Harrigan said, changing tactics. "That's federal jurisdiction if they crossed state lines." The temperature seemed to drop. Luke's men shifted nervously. "Those 6 men," Luke said slowly, deliberately, "murdered my fiancée. Shot her down in cold blood when she couldn't tell them where I was. Yes, I hunted them down. Yes, I killed them. And I'd do it again. If that's what you want to arrest me for, Marshal, then you'd better be prepared to go through my men to do it." The standoff stretched taut. Clara could see fingers hovering over triggers, men preparing for violence. Then another voice rang out. "That's enough of this nonsense." Everyone turned to see Sheriff Watson riding up with a posse of his own townspeople from Culverson, including Judge Morrison and several members of the town council. "Marshal Harrigan," Sheriff Watson said, "I've been investigating your credentials. Turns out you were stripped of your badge 2 months ago for taking bribes. You're no more a federal marshal than I'm the president." Harrigan's face went white. "That's not—" "I've got the telegram from the U.S. Marshals Service right here." Watson continued, pulling out a paper. "You're impersonating a federal officer, which is a crime. And Big Al McGrady, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping and fraud." Big Al's face contorted with rage. "You can't arrest me. I own half of Red Rock." "This isn't Red Rock," Judge Morrison said, riding forward. "This is my jurisdiction, and I've reviewed all the evidence. The marriage between Luke and Clara Carver is legal and binding. Any attempt to dissolve it by force is a crime." For a moment, the situation balanced on a knife's edge. Then Big Al made his fatal mistake. His hand went for his gun, whether to shoot Luke, Clara, or the sheriff. No one would ever know. He cleared leather, but Luke was faster. A single shot rang out, and Big Al McGrady tumbled from his horse, a hole in his chest. "Anyone else?" Luke asked quietly, his smoking gun still in his hand. The hired guns looked at their dead employer, calculated their odds, and began backing away. Without Big Al's money, there was no reason to fight. "Smart choice," Sheriff Watson said. "Now get out of my county, all of you." As the mercenaries scattered, Samuel Whitmore spurred his horse forward. "You killed him," he screamed at Luke. "You murdered him." "He drew first," Watson said calmly. "Self-defense clear as day, and you, Whitmore, are under arrest for attempting to sell your stepdaughter into bondage." "She's lying about everything," Samuel protested as Watson's men surrounded him. "I was trying to arrange a good marriage for her." "Save it for the judge," Watson said, nodding to his men to take Samuel away. Clara climbed down from the stronghold, making her way to Luke. He stood over Big Al's body, his face unreadable. "You all right?" she asked softly. "I broke my promise," Luke said. "Swore I'd never kill in anger again." "That wasn't anger," Clara said. "That was protection. There's a difference." Judge Morrison approached them. "Mr. and Mrs. Carver, I apologize for all this unpleasantness. Your marriage stands, and no one will challenge it again." He paused. though I do hope you'll consider making it more than just a legal convenience. You two seem well suited." As the judge rode away with the others, leaving Luke's people to deal with the aftermath, Clara and Luke stood together in the morning sun. "It's over," Clara said, hardly believing it. "This part is," Luke agreed. "But Samuel will likely go to prison. Big Al's dead. You're free to do whatever you want now. The marriage, we can annul it if you want. You don't need my protection anymore." Clara looked at him, this hard man who'd killed for her, who'd risked everything to keep her safe. She thought about the empty room waiting for Margaret, about the loneliness she'd seen in his eyes, about the way their hands fit together. "What if I don't want it annulled?" she asked quietly. Luke turned to her surprise and something else hope in his eyes. "Clara, you don't owe me anything." "I know," she interrupted. "This isn't about owing, it's about choosing. And I choose you, Luke Carver, if you'll have me." Instead of answering with words, Luke pulled her into his arms and kissed her properly. This time, not for show or legal necessity, but because he wanted to, because she wanted him to. When they finally broke apart, both breathless Walt's voice rang out from behind them. "About damn time. Rosa, you owe me $5. The tension broke as everyone laughed, the weight of recent danger giving way to relief, and something that might have been joy. The journey back to the ranch took on a different quality now that the immediate danger had passed. Clara rode beside Luke, their horses matching pace, and she found herself stealing glances at this man who was legally her husband and might become so much more. The weight of Big Al's threat no longer pressed on her shoulders, but something else had taken its place, the terrifying possibility of genuine happiness. "You're thinking too loud?" Luke said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "How does one think too loud?" Clara asked. "Your face shows everything. Right now you're worried about something. Want to tell me what—" Clara considered deflecting, but they'd moved past that, hadn't they? "I was thinking that I know how to run from danger, how to fight for survival, but I don't know how to be married, how to be a wife, especially to someone like you." "Someone like me?" Luke's eyebrow raised. "Someone who's seen so much, done so much. I'm just a girl from Red Rock who can barely shoot straight." Luke pulled his horse to a stop, and Clara did the same. He looked at her with those sage-green eyes that seemed to see straight through her. "You're the woman who faced down Amos Pike's gang with nothing but cleverness and courage. You stood up to Big Al McGrady when most would have cowered. You chose freedom over safety, and when that freedom came with a price, you didn't flinch." He reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. "Don't sell yourself short, Clara. You're exactly the kind of woman who could handle someone like me." Before Clara could respond, Walt rode up from the rear guard. "Boss, we've got company coming. Single rider moving fast from the south." Luke's hand went to his gun, old habits dying hard. "Can you make out who—" "Too far yet, but they're riding like the devil's after them." They waited, tension creeping back into the group until the rider was close enough to identify. It was Tommy, who was supposed to be watching the ranch. "Boss?" Tommy called out, his horse lathered with sweat. "Thank God I found you. We've got trouble at the ranch." "What kind of trouble?" Luke demanded. "Big Al's men, the ones who ran off, they didn't all leave the county. About a dozen of them hit the ranch at dawn. We held them off, but they set fire to the barn before we drove them away. Lost most of the winter feed and 2 horses." Luke's face darkened. "Anyone hurt?" "Rodriguez took a bullet in the shoulder, but he'll live. Rosa's tending to him. The house, still standing. They tried for it, but we had enough men to keep them back." Luke turned to his men. "We ride hard for home. Those bastards think they can burn me out. They're about to learn different." The group spurred their horses into a gallop, eating up the miles between the mountain hideout and the ranch. Clara kept pace, her mind racing. She'd thought it was over when Big Al died, but violence, she was learning, had a way of breeding more violence. They smelled the smoke before they saw it. The barn was a blackened skeleton against the sky wisps of smoke still rising from the ruins. Men were hauling water from the well, dousing the last hot spots. The main house stood intact, but Clara could see bullet holes in the walls, broken windows, hastily boarded up. Rosa came running out as they arrived. "Senor Luke, thank the saints you're safe. Those men, they were like demons, shooting and burning." "Where's Rodriguez?" Luke asked, dismounting. "Inside, the bullet went clean through. He'll be all right with rest. Luke nodded, then turned to Walt. Double the watch. Send riders to track those men. I want to know where they are and what they're planning. You think they'll come back? Clara asked. They tasted blood and got away with it. Yeah, they'll be back. Luke's expression was grim. This was a message. They're saying Big Al's death doesn't end this. That night the ranch felt like an armed camp. Men patrolled constantly, rifles at the ready. Clara helped Rosa tend to Rodriguez, who was fevered but stable. The young vaquero kept apologizing for getting shot as if it were somehow his fault. You protected the ranch, Clara told him firmly. You did your job. Now let us do ours and get you well. She found Luke in his study later poring over a map of the region by lamplight. Planning our defense, she asked. Planning our offense, he corrected. I'm done being reactive. These men want a war. I'll give them one. Luke, Clara started, worried about the darkness she heard in his voice. They burned my barn, Clara. Shot one of my men. Tried to burn the house where you were supposed to be sleeping. His fist came down on the desk. I've tried to leave violence behind, but it keeps finding me. Clara moved around the desk, placing her hands on his shoulders. They were rigid with tension. What would Margaret want you to do? Luke stiffened at the name, then slowly relaxed. She'd want me to be better than them, to find another way. And what do you want? I want them dead, Luke said honestly. Every last one of them. But that's not who I'm trying to be anymore. Not who I want to be for... He trailed off. For... Clara prompted gently. For you, Luke finished quietly. I don't want you to see me become the killer I used to be. Clara turned his chair so he faced her, then surprised them both by sitting in his lap, her arms around his neck. I've already seen you kill Luke. You killed to protect me. That doesn't make you a monster. It makes you mine. The last word hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Luke's hands came up to frame her face, and this time, when they kissed, there was no hesitation, no holding back. It was hunger and promise, and the desperate need of two lonely people finding each other. A knock at the door interrupted them. Clara scrambled to her feet, her face flushed as Walt entered. Sorry to interrupt, boss, but we found them. The men who hit us are holed up at the old Baxter place about 10 miles east. Looks like they're planning to stay a while. How many? Luke asked, his voice remarkably steady for a man who'd just had his wife in his lap. 11, maybe 12. They've got supplies for a siege. Then we'll give them one, Luke said. Get the men ready. We ride at first light. After Walt left, Clara turned to Luke. I'm coming with you. No. Luke. Clara, please, I can't do what needs to be done if I'm worried about you. And I can't sit here wondering if you're coming back, Clara countered. I'm not Margaret, Luke. I'm not going to wait at home while you fight my battles. Luke studied her for a long moment. You're right. You're not Margaret. He pulled her close again. You're something entirely different. And maybe that's exactly what I need. They stood there holding each other, both aware that tomorrow would bring more violence, more testing of their still fragile bond. Dawn came too soon. Clara dressed in pants and one of Luke's shirts, better for riding and fighting than her dresses. She strapped on her father's Colt, the weight of it familiar now after Luke's training. When she came downstairs, Luke was waiting with a rifle. If you're coming, you're doing this right, he said. You stay back, you follow orders, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood. Understood. Clara agreed, though they both knew she'd never abandon him. They rode out with 15 men, leaving enough behind to defend the ranch if this was a trap. The Baxter place was an abandoned homestead, the family driven off by Apache raids years ago. It was a good defensive position, solid adobe walls, clear fields of fire, a well for water. Luke studied it through field glasses from a ridge above. They fortified it. This won't be easy. We could wait them out, Walt suggested, starve them into surrender. That could take weeks. And who knows what other mischief they might plan in that time. Luke lowered the glasses. No, we need to end this now. He divided his men into 3 groups. One would provide covering fire from the ridge, another would circle around to cut off escape, and the third, led by Luke himself, would make the direct assault. Clara, you stay with the covering fire group, Luke ordered. She wanted to protest but saw the wisdom in it. Her rifle skills were good enough now to be useful at a distance. As Luke's assault group moved into position, Clara found herself holding her breath. The morning sun was climbing, casting long shadows across the desert. Everything seemed preternaturally quiet, as if the land itself was waiting. The attack began with Walt's group opening fire from the ridge, their rifles cracking in sequence. The outlaws returned fire from the windows of the Baxter place, and suddenly the air was full of lead and gun smoke. Luke's group rushed forward using what cover they could find: rocks, scraggly trees, old fence posts. Clara watched through the rifle scope as Luke moved with deadly grace, advancing steadily despite the bullets whining around him. Then she saw it, an outlaw drawing a bead on Luke from a side window he couldn't see. Without thinking, Clara squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, and the outlaw spun away from the window, his shot going wild. "Good shooting, Mrs. Carver," one of the men beside her said. Clara didn't have time to respond. The battle was intensifying. Luke's group had reached the walls of the house, and now it was close quarters fighting. She saw Luke kick in a door and disappear inside, and her heart climbed into her throat. The gunfire from inside the house was muffled but intense. Clara could only imagine what was happening in those close confines, men fighting room-to-room death, lurking around every corner. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the shooting stopped. Smoke drifted from the windows, and for a terrible moment, Clara didn't know who had won. Luke appeared in the doorway, his shirt torn, a cut on his cheek, but alive. He raised his hand in victory, and Clara felt her knees go weak with relief. The fight was over. 8 outlaws were dead, 3 wounded and captured. Luke had lost 1 man with 3 more wounded. It was a victory, but it tasted of ash. As they dealt with the aftermath, tending wounds, securing prisoners, gathering weapons, Clara found Luke standing apart, staring at the desert. "You saved my life," he said without turning. "That shot from the ridge. I never saw him." "We're even then," Clara said. "You've saved mine more than once." Luke turned to her, and she saw the weight he carried, the toll that returning to violence had taken. "I thought I was done with this. The killing, the blood. I thought I could be a rancher, live a quiet life." "You can," Clara insisted. "This was just what another exception, another reason to pick up the gun." Luke shook his head. "Maybe some men can't escape what they are." Clara grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "You're not just a killer, Luke. You're a protector. There's a difference." "Is there dead is dead, Clara?" "Yes, there is. Those men came to burn and pillage and kill. You stopped them. You protected your people, your home, our home." She emphasized the last words. Luke pulled her against him, holding her tight. "Our home," he repeated quietly. "I like the sound of that." They returned to the ranch to find unexpected visitors, Judge Morrison and Sheriff Watson, along with a well-dressed stranger. "Mr. Carver," the judge said, "this is Mr. Harrison from the Territorial Governor's office. He's here about the recent troubles." Harrison was a thin man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Carver, I've been sent to investigate the deaths of Albert McGrady and the subsequent violence. There are concerns in Santa Fe about a range war developing." "The only war was started by McGrady and continued by his hired guns," Luke said evenly. "We've only defended ourselves." "Be that as it may, 12 men are now dead. That tends to concern the authorities." Clara stepped forward. "Mr. Harrison, everything that's happened stems from my stepfather attempting to sell me to Albert McGrady against my will. Mr. Carver protected me, married me to ensure my safety, and has been defending us against continued attacks. If the authorities are concerned, perhaps they should be concerned about why women can be sold like cattle in this territory." Harrison looked uncomfortable. "Yes, well, that's a matter for the legislature." "No, sir," Clara interrupted. "It's a matter of basic human dignity, and until the law recognizes that men like my husband will have to protect those, the law won't." Sheriff Watson cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, Harrison, I've investigated thoroughly. Every death has been justified self-defense or defense of property. Luke Carver has broken no laws." Harrison sighed. "Very well. But Mr. Carver, I'm warning you, the governor wants peace in this region. Any more violence, justified or not, and there will be consequences." After the officials left, Luke and Clara stood on the porch, watching the sun set over their damaged but still standing ranch. "You were magnificent," Luke said, "the way you stood up to Harrison." "I learned from the best," Clara replied, leaning against him. "So what now? Will there be peace?" "For a while. The outlaws are scattered or dead. Your stepfather will go to prison. But men like us, Clara, we tend to attract trouble." "Men like us?" Clara smiled. "I think you mean people like us. I'm not some delicate flower anymore, Luke Carver." "No," Luke agreed, turning to kiss her. "You're definitely not." That night, for the first time since their hasty marriage, Clara didn't go to the room that had been prepared for Margaret. She went to Luke's room, to Luke's bed, to Luke's arms. They came together with a desperate passion, two damaged souls finding healing in each other's touch. "I love you," Luke whispered in the darkness afterward, the words seeming to surprise him. "I didn't think I could anymore, but I do." "I love you too," Clara replied, tracing the scars on his chest, each one a story of survival. "Not because you saved me, but because you let me save myself." They lay intertwined, listening to the night sounds of the ranch horses, nickering men changing watch, the distant cry of a coyote. It was a hard life they'd chosen, or that had chosen them, but it was theirs. A week passed in relative peace. The barn was being rebuilt, the wounded were healing, and Clara was learning to be a rancher's wife, though her version involved as much time in the saddle working cattle as in the house managing domestic affairs. Rosa was scandalized and delighted in equal measure. "Senora Clara, ladies don't brand cattle," Rosa protested as Clara came in covered in dust and smelling of smoke from the branding fires. "This lady does, Pa," Clara replied with a grin. "How else will I learn to run this place when Luke's away?" "Away?" Luke asked, entering the kitchen. "Who says I'm going anywhere?" But even as he spoke, Clara could see the restlessness in him. The ranch was peaceful, productive, but Luke was a man used to action to purpose beyond just raising cattle. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Clara broached the subject. "You're not happy just being a rancher, are you?" Luke looked at her in surprise. "What makes you say that? You patrol the property like you're expecting an attack. You clean your guns daily. You watch the horizon like it might bring trouble or hope. You're not sure which." Luke was quiet for a moment. "I thought I wanted peace. After Margaret, all I wanted was to hide here, raise cattle, forget the world. But you're not made for hiding," Clara finished. "Neither am I, it turns out." "What are you saying?" Clara took a deep breath. "Sheriff Watson is getting old. He mentioned the other day that he's thinking of retiring. The town needs a new sheriff, someone who can handle the rough elements that drift through." "You think I should be a lawman?" Luke laughed, but it wasn't dismissive. "That's quite a change from gun for hire." "Not so different. You'd still be protecting people, keeping the peace, but it would be legal respectable. We could have a house in town, be part of the community." Luke considered this. "And what would you do as a sheriff's wife host tea parties?" Clara snorted. "Hardly. I was thinking I might open a school. This territory needs education if it's ever going to be civilized, and someone needs to teach these frontier children that women are more than property." "A sheriff and a schoolmarm," Luke mused. "We'd be downright respectable." "Disappointing, I know," Clara teased. Luke pulled her onto his lap, a move that had become familiar and cherished. "Nothing about you could ever be disappointing, Clara Carver." They kissed long and deep, but were interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Luke was on his feet instantly, hand on his gun, but relaxed when he recognized Walt's voice calling out, "Boss, Mrs. Carver, you need to see this." They rushed outside to find Walt and Tommy supporting a wounded man between them. Clara gasped when she recognized him. It was one of Big Al's hired guns, the cold-eyed one she'd seen talking to McGrady before he died. "Found him crawling across the north pasture," Walt explained. "He's been shot up pretty bad." "Why bring him here?" Luke demanded. The wounded man raised his head with effort. Because I have information about your wife, about her real father." Clara's blood went cold. "My father is dead." The man coughed, blood speckling his lips. "Tom Whitmore. Wasn't your real father. Your mother. She never told you." "You're lying," Clara said, but her voice shook. "Why would I lie when I'm dying? the man gasped. Your real father is Jacob Morrison, the judge. The world seemed to tilt. Clara grabbed Luke's arm for support. That's impossible. Your mother and Morrison, before she married Whitmore. Morrison was already married, couldn't acknowledge you, but he's been watching all these years. The man's voice was fading. Why tell us this? Luke demanded. Because Morrison paid Big Al to take the girl, wanted her, away from here, where no one would know, protect his reputation. The man's eyes were glazing. Big Al was supposed to take her far away. Not marry her, but Big Al got greedy. With those words, the man died, leaving Clara and Luke staring at each other in shock. It could be lies, Luke said quietly, or it could be the truth, Clara whispered. My mother never talked about her life before marrying my father, and Judge Morrison, he's always been kind to me even when we had nothing. I thought it was charity. We need to be careful how we handle this, Luke warned. If it's true, Morrison has been playing a deep game. Clara's shock was turning to anger. If it's true, he let my stepfather abuse me. He let Big Al try to buy me. He stood there and married us without saying a word about being my father, unless he was trying to protect you in his own twisted way, Luke suggested. Think about it. He performed our marriage without question, made it legal and binding immediately. Maybe that was his way of keeping you safe from Big Al without revealing the truth. Clara didn't know what to think or feel. Her whole life had been built on lies, it seemed. The only truth she could count on was standing beside her Luke, her husband, her anchor in this storm. What do we do? She asked. First, we verify if this is true. Then we decide what to do about it. Luke's face was grim. But Clara, if Morrison really is your father and he conspired with Big Al, then he's responsible for everything that happened, Clara finished. The deaths, the violence, all of it. They spent a sleepless night debating what to do. By morning, they'd decided on a course of action. They would confront Morrison privately, away from the law and the town's prying eyes. They found the judge at his home on the outskirts of Culverson, a modest but well-appointed house that spoke of comfortable means. He answered the door himself, and Clara saw the truth in his eyes, before he even spoke the recognition, the guilt, the fear. Clara, he said quietly, I wondered when this day would come. It's true then, Clara demanded. You're my father. Morrison aged 10 years in that moment. Yes, God help me, yes. Luke's hand was on his gun. You conspired with Big Al McGrady. No, Morrison said quickly. Not the way you think. Please come inside. Let me explain. They followed him into his study, a room lined with law books and portraits of stern-faced men. Morrison poured himself a whiskey with shaking hands. Your mother, Elizabeth, and I were young, in love, stupid. I was already married, an arranged match by our families. When Elizabeth discovered she was pregnant, we both knew scandal would destroy us all. Tom Whitmore had been courting her. He was a good man who loved her and agreed to raise you as his own. So you just abandoned us? Claire's voice was bitter. I provided money when I could, tried to watch over you from afar. When Tom died and your mother married Samuel, I tried to intervene, but Elizabeth was proud, wouldn't take my help. Morrison's voice broke. When she died, I failed you. I should have claimed you, then scandal be damned, but I was a coward. And Big Al? Luke pressed. When Samuel's debts to McGrady became known, I went to Big Al privately. I offered to pay the debts if he would leave Clara alone. He agreed, took my money, then went after her anyway. Morrison's face was wet with tears. I performed your marriage immediately because I knew it was the only way to protect you. Luke Carver's reputation would keep you safe where my money and position had failed. Clara stared at this man who was her father, this stranger who had shaped her life from the shadows. Your cowardice nearly got me killed, got other men killed. I know, Morrison whispered. I know, and I'll carry that guilt forever. Your guilt means nothing to the dead, Luke said coldly. What are you prepared to do now? Morrison straightened, finding some spine. Whatever Clara wants. I'll publicly acknowledge her as my daughter if she wishes. I'll resign my judgeship. I'll leave the territory. Whatever she decides. Clara looked at Luke, then back at Morrison. I don't want your name. I'm Clara Carver now, and that's who I'll stay. But you will use your position to help Luke become sheriff when Watson retires. You'll support my school with funding, and you'll ensure that no woman in this territory can be sold into marriage against her will. You'll make that law happen. Morrison nodded eagerly. Yes, all of that. I can do that. And, Clara continued, her voice steel, you'll do it all without ever claiming connection to me. I'm not your daughter. I'm Tom Whitmore's daughter, and I'm Luke Carver's wife. That's all I am or need to be. As they left Morrison's house, Luke took Clara's hand. You handled that with more grace than he deserved. Grace? Clara laughed bitterly. I wanted to shoot him. But you didn't. You chose to build something positive from his guilt. That takes strength. Luke stopped walking, turning to face her. Are you all right? Learning all this? I've learned that family isn't about blood, Clara said firmly. Tom Whitmore raised me, loved me, taught me to be strong. He was my father. And you're my family now. The rest is just history. They walked back through town, and Clara noticed people watching them differently. Word had spread about the fight at the Baxter place about Clara's role in it. Women who had previously ignored her now nodded respectfully. Men touched their hats. They weren't just seeing Luke Carver's surprisingly acquired wife anymore. They were seeing a woman who had fought for her place in this harsh land and won. Mrs. Carver, a voice called out. It was Mrs. Patterson, the banker's wife, and the unofficial social leader of Culverson. Might I have a word? Clara and Luke exchanged glances. Mrs. Patterson had been notably cool toward Clara since the marriage, suspicious of the circumstances. Of course, Mrs. Patterson, Clara replied. I've been hearing things, the older woman said, her sharp eyes studying Clara. About you starting a school. Is this true? I'm considering it, yes. Good, Mrs. Patterson said surprisingly. This town needs a school desperately. I have 3 grandchildren growing up ignorant, and it won't do. If you're serious about this, you'll have my support, and my husband's bank will help with funding. Clara was stunned. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. That's very generous. Nonsense. It's practical. A town without education is doomed to remain a backwater. She paused, then added with a slight smile, besides, any woman who can outshoot Amos Pike's gang deserves respect. Good day, Mrs. Carver. Mr. Carver. As she walked away, Luke chuckled. I think you just got accepted into Culverson society. God help me, Clara muttered, making Luke laugh harder. That evening they received another visitor, Sheriff Watson. He came alone, looking tired and older than his years. Luke, Clara. He greeted them, accepting the whiskey Luke offered. I'll get right to the point. I'm retiring at the end of the month. This business with Big Al and the aftermath, I'm too old for this level of violence anymore. Tom, you've been a good sheriff, Luke said. Maybe once, but the territory's changing, getting rougher. It needs someone younger, someone with your kind of experience. Watson looked directly at Luke. The town council meets tomorrow. They'll be discussing my replacement. Your name has been mentioned. By who? Luke asked. Judge Morrison was quite vocal about it. Mrs. Patterson, too, interestingly enough. And most of the business owners. They remember how you handled Big Al, how you've protected the town's interests over the years. I was a gun for hire, Luke said bluntly. That's not usually sheriff material. You were a man who lived by a code even in that life. Never took a job that would hurt innocent people. Never broke your word. That's exactly sheriff material in my book. Watson stood to leave. Think about it, Luke. This town needs you. And maybe you need it too. After Watson left, Luke stood at the window for a long time, staring out at the darkening sky. Clara could see the conflict in his shoulders, the weight of decision pressing down on him. You want to take it? She said not a question, but a statement of understanding. I never thought I'd wear a badge, Luke replied quietly. Men like me usually end up on the other side of them. Men like you are exactly who should wear them, Clara countered, moving to stand beside him. You know both sides of the law. You understand why men go bad and what it takes to stop them. It would mean living in town most of the time. The ranch would become secondary. Walt can manage the ranch. He's been doing it for years anyway. Clara took his hand. This is your chance to become who you were meant to be, not who circumstances forced you to become. Luke turned to her, his eyes searching hers. When did you become so wise? Somewhere between running from Big Al and learning to shoot straight, Clara replied with a small smile. We both changed, Luke. Maybe it's time to embrace that change fully. The next morning, they rode into town together for the council meeting. The small courthouse was packed with citizens all curious about who would replace Sheriff Watson. Clara noticed Judge Morrison presiding, his eyes carefully avoiding hers. We're here to discuss the appointment of a new sheriff, Morrison announced. Several names have been put forward. We'll hear from each candidate. 3 men stood to make their cases. The first was a former deputy from Tucson, full of credentials, but clearly unfamiliar with Culverson's unique challenges. The second was a local rancher who meant well but had no real law enforcement experience. The third was Luke. I'm not going to stand here and pretend I'm a traditional candidate, Luke began, his voice carrying clearly through the room. Most of you know my past. I've lived by the gun, made my living in violence, but I've also lived by a code. I've never hurt an innocent, never broken my word, and never backed down from protecting those who needed it. What makes you think you can enforce the law when you've spent years outside it? Someone called from the crowd. Because I understand both sides, Luke replied. I know what drives men to desperation, what makes them choose violence. Sometimes that means I can stop trouble before it starts. Sometimes it means I know exactly how dangerous a man is and what it'll take to stop him. What about your wife? Mrs. Patterson asked. She's proven herself capable, but being a sheriff's wife is dangerous. Clara stood up. If I may. At Morrison's nod, she continued, I've already faced danger. I've been shot at, threatened, nearly sold into slavery. I'd rather face those dangers beside a man with a badge and the law behind him than as the wife of a gunfighter, no matter how honorable. She makes a good point, someone murmured, and others nodded agreement. The vote was called. It wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. Luke Carver would be Culverson's new sheriff. Watson himself pinned the badge on Luke's shirt. Wear it well, son. The town's in good hands. As they walked to the sheriff's office, Luke's office now, Clara felt the shift in how people looked at them. They were respectable now, pillars of the community. It felt strange and wonderful and slightly terrifying. The office was small, but organized with a desk, a gun rack, and 2 cells in the back. Watson spent the afternoon showing Luke the paperwork, the patrol routes, the informal agreements with nearby towns. Your biggest challenge will be the Dixon gang, Watson warned. They've been hitting stages and freight wagons north of here. Haven't come into Culverson yet, but it's only a matter of time. The Dixon gang, Clara asked, looking up from where she was examining the wanted posters on the wall. 4 brothers and maybe a dozen other men, Watson explained, led by Cole Dixon. Mean as a snake and twice as smart. They've killed at least 6 men in their robberies. Luke studied the wanted poster showing Cole Dixon's face, cold eyes, and a scar across his left cheek. What's their pattern? Hit fast, take everything valuable, disappear into the Badlands. They know the territory better than anyone. Watson gathered his personal items from the desk. I've been trying to track them for 2 years. Maybe you'll have better luck. That night, Luke and Clara moved some of their belongings into the small house attached to the sheriff's office. It was modest compared to the ranch house, but Clara threw herself into making it a home, hanging curtains and arranging furniture with Rosa's enthusiastic help. A sheriff and a teacher, Rosa said proudly. Senor Luke and Senora Clara are becoming very important people. We're the same people we were yesterday, Clara protested. No, senora. Yesterday you were survivors. Today you are builders. There is a difference. Luke's first week as sheriff passed quietly. He handled a few drunk cowboys, settled a dispute over cattle brands, and made his presence known throughout the town. Clara, meanwhile, threw herself into establishing the school. Mrs. Patterson proved as good as her word, rallying the town's women to donate supplies and furniture. The schoolhouse was a single room behind the church, dusty and long unused. Clara spent days cleaning, organizing, and preparing lessons. Word spread and parents began bringing their children to meet the new teacher. Can you really teach them to read? One mother asked hopefully. My Johnny's bright, but we've never had the learning to teach him ourselves. I can and I will, Clara promised. Every child deserves education. She had 17 students enrolled by the end of the week, ranging in age from 6 to 14. It was daunting, but Clara felt a purpose she'd never experienced before. The peace was shattered on a Thursday afternoon. Clara was teaching arithmetic when she heard the thunder of hooves and shouting from Main Street. Through the window, she saw a cloud of dust and riders, many riders pouring into town. "Children under your desks now," she ordered calmly, though her heart was racing. She grabbed the rifle she'd started keeping in the corner Luke had insisted and moved to the door. The Dixon gang had come to Culverson. They rode down Main Street like conquering armies of old, shooting into the air, whooping and hollering. Cole Dixon himself led them, his scarred face twisted in a grin of malicious pleasure. They stopped in front of the bank. Clara could see Luke emerging from the sheriff's office badge, glinting in the sun, walking calmly toward the gang. He was alone. His newly appointed deputies were out on patrol. "That's far enough," Luke called out when he was within earshot. Cole Dixon turned in his saddle, eyeing Luke with amusement. Well, well, Watson finally grew too old, did he? And they replaced him with, "Who are you exactly?" "Sheriff Carver, and you're under arrest for robbery and murder." "Cole." The gang laughed, 13 men all armed against one sheriff. "Sheriff Carver," Cole mused. "Wait, I know that name. You're the gun for hire. Killed the Paulson brothers up in Colorado." "That was a long time ago," Luke said evenly. "Not so long that you've forgotten how to count, I hope. 13 against 1 ain't good odds, Sheriff." 14 against 2. Claire's voice rang out. She'd moved to the roof of the mercantile rifle aimed at Cole's head. "And I don't miss at this range." Cole's eyes flicked to her, taking in the steady hands, the determined face. "Your woman, Sheriff, my wife," Luke confirmed. "And she's right. She doesn't miss." The tension stretched taut. Citizens were hiding in buildings, peering through windows. The gang members' hands hovered near their guns, waiting for Cole's signal. Then Walt and 3 ranch hands appeared from the livery stable, armed and ready. Tommy emerged from the hotel with 2 more men. The deputies Luke had sent on patrol must have been recalled somehow because they appeared at the end of the street. "Looks like the odds just changed," Luke said calmly. "Now you can try to rob that bank and most of you will die. Or you can ride out now and live to rob another day. Your choice, Cole." Cole Dixon was many things, but he wasn't stupid. He could count, and the math wasn't in his favor anymore. The sheriff had turned the ambush around on them. "This ain't over, Carver," Cole said. "You can't watch every road protect every shipment." "Maybe not," Luke agreed. "But I can protect this town, and if you come here again, I'll end you." For a long moment, the 2 men stared at each other, measuring, calculating. Then Cole wheeled his horse around. "We're leaving, boys. This town's gone sour." As the gang rode out, Clara climbed down from the roof, her legs shaky with relief. Luke met her at the bottom, pulling her into a quick, fierce embrace. "That was dangerous, he said into her hair. "So was facing them alone," she countered. "I wasn't alone. I knew you were watching." He pulled back to look at her. "You've been practicing with that rifle." "Every morning before school, Walt's been helping me." Clara managed a shaky smile. "I figured a sheriff's wife should know how to provide backup." The townspeople emerged from their hiding places, looking at Luke and Clara with a mixture of awe and gratitude. They'd stood up to the Dixon gang and won without firing a shot. But Luke knew it wasn't over. Cole Dixon wasn't the type to forget a humiliation. The attack came 3 nights later, but not where Luke expected. Instead of hitting the town, the Dixon gang struck the ranch. Luke and Clara were in town when Walt came riding in his horse lathered with sweat. "They hit us hard, boss, Joe," he gasped. "Burned the new barn, scattered the cattle. Rodriguez is dead. They left a message." The message was simple, carved into a wooden plank. "Your move, Sheriff." Luke's face was stone as he read it. Clara could see the old darkness rising in him, the gunfighter pushing against the lawman's restraints. "I'm going after them," Luke said quietly. "We're going after them," Clara corrected. When Luke started to protest, she cut him off. "They attacked our home, Luke, our people. I'm not sitting this out." Luke looked at her, his wife, his partner, his equal, and nodded. "Get the deputies." "We ride in an hour." They assembled a posse of 12 riders, including Clara. She'd traded her teacher's dress for pants and a jacket, her father's Colt on her hip, a rifle in her saddle scabbard. The trail was easy to follow. At first, the gang hadn't bothered to hide their tracks, wanting Luke to follow. But as they entered the Badlands, the trail became harder to read. The gang knew this territory intimately. They're leading us into a trap, Walt warned. I know, Luke replied, but sometimes the only way out of a trap is through it. They found the gang's camp at sunset nestled in a box canyon with high walls on three sides. It was a perfect defensive position or a perfect trap, depending on your perspective. They know we're here, Luke said, studying the camp through field glasses. Look at how they're positioned. So what do we do? One of the deputies asked. We give them what they expect, then we give them what they don't. Luke outlined his plan quickly. It was risky, perhaps even foolish, but it was their best chance. As full dark fell, Luke and 6 men approached the canyon entrance, openly calling out a challenge. The gang responded with gunfire, pinning them behind rocks. It was exactly what Cole had expected, a frontal assault by an honorable lawman. What he hadn't expected was Clara and the others climbing the canyon walls in the darkness, moving silent as shadows to positions above the camp. Clara's heart pounded as she pulled herself up the rough stone, trying not to think about the drop below. When they were in position, Walt gave the signal, a coyote call that echoed off the canyon walls. Luke and his group charged forward, drawing the gang's fire. And from above, Clara and the others rained lead down on the exposed outlaws. The battle was fierce but brief. Caught between two forces, the gang's defensive position became a death trap. Clara aimed carefully, deliberately, trying not to think about the fact that she was ending lives. She saw Cole Dixon trying to rally his men, saw him spot her on the cliff above. Their eyes met across the distance, and Cole raised his rifle toward her. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Cole's bullet whined off the rock near Clara's head, sending chips flying. Clara's bullet took him in the chest, spinning him around and down. With their leader fallen, the remaining gang members threw down their weapons and surrendered. Of the 13 who'd ridden into Culverson's 6 were dead, 4 wounded, 3 captured unharmed. Luke's posse had lost 2 men with 3 wounded. As they secured the prisoners and tended the wounded, Luke found Clara sitting apart, staring at her hands. You saved lives tonight, he said gently, sitting beside her. I took them too, she replied, her voice hollow. I've never, in all the fighting before, I don't think I ever actually killed anyone. Tonight I did. I watched him fall. Luke was quiet for a moment. It doesn't get easier. It shouldn't get easier. But sometimes it's necessary. Cole would have killed you, killed me, killed innocent people. You stopped him. Is this what our life will be? Clara asked. Violence and death and constant danger? Not constant, Luke said, pulling her against him. But yes, sometimes. This is the price of the life we've chosen. The question is it worth it? Clara thought about her students' eager faces learning to read. She thought about the town safe now from the Dixon gang. She thought about the rule of law slowly civilizing the frontier. Yes, she said finally, it's worth it, but I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me we won't lose ourselves in this, that we won't become so hard that we forget how to be human. Luke kissed the top of her head. I promise. You keep me human, Clara. You always have from the moment you used my name to save yourself. They returned to Culverson as heroes, but Clara didn't feel heroic. She felt tired, bloodied, forever changed. But when her students ran to greet her, when their parents thanked her for protecting the town, she understood that this was the burden of those who stood between civilization and chaos. Judge Morrison came to see them that evening. The man who was secretly her father looked older, more fragile. I heard about what happened, he said. Claire, Are you all right? I'm fine, she said coolly. The distance between them hadn't decreased despite knowing the truth. I've gotten word from Santa Fe, Morrison continued. The territorial government is impressed with how you handled the Dixon gang. They're sending more resources for law enforcement. And Clara, they've approved funding for the school. Proper funding. Good, Clara said simply. Morrison hesitated, then pulled out an envelope. This came for you, from Samuel's lawyer. Clara tensed. Her stepfather was in prison, but apparently he could still reach out to torment her. She opened the envelope, Luke reading over her shoulder. It was notification that Samuel had died in prison, killed in a fight with another inmate. But more importantly, it contained a confession. On his deathbed, Samuel had admitted to killing Clara's mother, poisoning her slowly to get access to what little money remained from Tom Whitmore's estate. Clara's hands shook. He killed her. He killed Mama. Luke took the letter, reading it fully. He's beyond justice now. Is he? Clara asked bitterly. He died in prison, violent and alone. Maybe that is justice. Morrison cleared his throat. There's more. With Samuel dead and his confession on record, Tom Whitmore's estate, what Samuel hadn't drunk away reverts to you. It's not much, but there's some land near the ranch that might be valuable. Clara laughed, harsh and bitter. Blood money. No, Luke said firmly. Your father's legacy finally reaching you. Tom would want you to have it. That night, Clara cried for the first time since the whole ordeal began. She cried for her mother murdered by a man she'd trusted. She cried for Tom Whitmore, the only father she'd known. She cried for the innocence she'd lost, the blood on her hands, the hard choices that had led her here. Luke held her through it all, not offering empty platitudes, just solid presence and unconditional love. I don't know who I am anymore, Clara whispered into the darkness. I'm not the girl who ran from Red Rock. I'm not the woman who married you for protection. I'm something else now. You're Clara Carver, Luke said simply. Teacher, protector, survivor, my wife. That's all you need to be. As autumn settled over the territory, life found a new rhythm. Luke established himself as a firm but fair sheriff, bringing law to a lawless land. Clara's school grew with children coming from miles around to learn. One evening, as Clara was preparing lessons, Luke came home with news. There's talk of statehood, he said. The territory might become a proper state within a few years. Things are changing, Clara observed. The frontier is becoming civilized. Is that good or bad? Luke asked. Both probably. Progress always is. Clara set aside her work. Luke, I have something to tell you. Something in her tone made him look up sharply. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Clara took a deep breath. I'm pregnant. Luke froze, staring at her. We're going to have a baby. Yes. Clara watched his face anxiously. They'd never discussed children, had been too busy surviving to think about the future. Luke crossed the room in 2 strides, lifting her out of her chair and spinning her around. A baby. Our baby. You're happy? Clara asked, laughing and crying at once. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He set her down gently, his hand going to her still flat stomach. When autumn, spring Rosa thinks, around the time the flowers bloom. Luke dropped to his knees, pressing his face against her stomach. Hello, little one. I'm your father, and I promise you I will keep you safe, you and your mother both. Clara ran her fingers through his hair, feeling a peace she hadn't known was possible. They'd traveled such a hard road to get here from that desperate night when she'd fled Red Rock to this moment of pure joy. A knock at the door interrupted them. Luke answered it to find one of his deputies looking worried. Sheriff, we've got trouble. There's a man at the saloon asking for you, says he's calling you out. Luke's jaw tightened. Who is it? Says his name is Marcus Vale. Says you killed his brother in Denver 5 years ago. Clara saw Luke's face change, the shadows returning. The Vale brothers were murderers. They killed a family of homesteaders, including 2 children. He doesn't seem to care about that, Sheriff. He wants blood for blood. Luke strapped on his gun. I'll handle it. Luke, no, Clara protested. You're a sheriff now, not a gunfighter. Sometimes they're the same thing. He kissed her forehead. Stay here. This won't take long. But Clara had never been one to stay put when Luke was in danger. She followed at a distance, rifle in hand, watching from the shadows as Luke walked down Main Street toward the saloon. Marcus Vale was waiting in the street, a tall man with dead eyes and a tied-down holster, a killer's setup. Luke Carver, Vale called out. You murdered my brother. Your brother murdered children, Luke replied calmly. I stopped him, that's all. I don't care what he did. He was blood. And now I'm going to take yours. Clara positioned herself on a roof again, rifle ready. But this time felt different. This wasn't about protecting the town or stopping criminals. This was about the past reaching out to drag them back. I'm giving you one chance to ride out, Luke said. I don't want to kill you. Then you'll die, Vale said, and went for his gun. The shots were so close together, they sounded like one. Both men drew and fired with inhuman speed. For a heartbeat, both remained standing. Then Vale crumpled a hole in his chest. Luke holstered his gun, turning away. He took 3 steps before his leg gave out blood spreading across his thigh. Luke. Clara was off the roof and running before she even realized she'd moved. She reached him as he fell, catching him, pressing her hand against the wound. "Just a graze," Luke said through gritted teeth, but Clara could see it was more than that. The bullet had gone deep. They got him to the doctor's office, where old Doc Martinez worked to stop the bleeding and extract the bullet. Clara held Luke's hand, trying not to think about losing him just when they'd found happiness. "He'll live," Doc Martinez finally announced, "but he'll limp for a while, maybe always." As Luke recovered, Clara made a decision. She found Marcus Vale's body at the undertaker's and paid for his burial. At the simple service, she was the only mourner. "Why?" Luke asked when she told him. "Because someone should mourn him even if he was a killer. Because the cycle of vengeance has to stop somewhere. Because our child deserves to grow up in a world where violence isn't the only answer." Luke pulled her close. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "You didn't find me," Clara reminded him. "I found you. Or rather, I stole your name and made you find me." They laughed, remembering that desperate lie that had brought them together. Winter came early that year, blanketing the territory in snow. Clara's pregnancy progressed, and she had to stop teaching when she could no longer stand for long periods. Mrs. Patterson took over the school temporarily, following Clara's lesson plans. Luke's leg healed slowly, leaving him with a permanent limp, as Doc Martinez had predicted. But he remained sheriff, adapting his style to his new limitation, relying more on intelligence and intimidation than quick-draw skills. One snowy evening, as they sat by the fire, Clara felt the baby kick for the first time. "Here," she said, guiding Luke's hand to the spot. They waited, and then another kick. Luke's face lit up with wonder. "Strong little thing." "Like the father," Clara said. "Like the mother," Luke countered. "Clara, I've been thinking, this life we've built, it's dangerous. Our child will grow up with a target on their back being the sheriff's kid." "I know," Clara said quietly. "But what's the alternative, run hide? Pretend we're other people. We could go east, start over where no one knows us." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Do you want to go east?" "No," Luke admitted. "This is our home. These are our people. I want our child to be safe. Our child will be as safe as we can make them. But more importantly, they'll grow up seeing their parents stand for something, fight for something. That's a legacy worth having." As winter deepened, news came that shocked the territory. Judge Morrison had died suddenly in his sleep. In his will, he left his considerable fortune to the Culverson School, with Clara named as the administrator. At his funeral, Clara stood with the other mourners, feeling complicated emotions. This man had been her biological father, but never truly her parent. He'd failed her when she needed him most, then tried to make amends when it was almost too late. "He wasn't a bad man," Luke said quietly beside her. "Just a weak one." "I know," Clara replied, "and in the end he tried to do right. That has to count for something." As Morrison was lowered into the ground, Clara felt a chapter of her life closing. The past, with all its pain and secrets, was finally buried. Now there was only the future. That future arrived early on a March morning as the first crocuses pushed through the melting snow. Clara's labor was long and difficult, with Doc Martinez and Rosa attending. Luke paced the hallway like a caged animal, jumping at every sound from the bedroom. Finally, after 16 hours, a baby's cry pierced the air. Luke was allowed in to find Clara exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle. "Your son," she said, offering the baby to Luke. Luke took his son with shaking hands, staring down at the tiny face, the small fingers that gripped his with surprising strength. "He's perfect," Luke whispered. "What should we name him?" Clara had been thinking about this for months. "Thomas Luke Carver, for the 2 men who shaped us." "Thomas Luke Carver," Luke repeated, testing the name. "Tom, our son." As Luke held their son and Clara dozed, he thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a desperate lie in the desert to a family in a frontier town, they'd traveled a road paved with violence and loss. but also with love and hope. The spring that brought their son also brought unexpected visitors to Culverson. Clara was nursing little Tom on the porch, enjoying the warm afternoon sun, when she saw the dust cloud on the horizon. Multiple riders moving with purpose. Luke emerged from the house, his hand instinctively checking his sidearm. His leg still pained him, especially when the weather changed, but he'd learned to compensate for the limp. "Trouble?" Clara asked, shifting Tom to her shoulder. "Maybe. Take the baby inside." But Clara had learned to read the tension in Luke's shoulders, and this wasn't the coiled readiness of expected violence. This was something else: uncertainty, perhaps even fear. The riders came into view, and Clara understood why. The man leading them wore expensive clothes and rode a horse that cost more than most people's homes. Behind him were 4 men who moved like professional guards, alert and dangerous. But it was the woman riding beside the leader that made Clara's breath catch. She was beautiful in that refined Eastern way, with pale skin that had never known desert sun, and a traveling dress that belonged in Boston, not Culverson. "Luke Carver's," the leader called out as they stopped in front of the house. "It's been a long time." "Harrison Grant," Luke replied, his voice carefully neutral. 8 years, if memory serves." "Your memory always was excellent," Grant dismounted with practiced ease. "May we speak privately?" "Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my wife," Luke said firmly. Grant's eyes flicked to Clara, taking in the baby, the simple dress, the calluses on her hands from years of hard work. His expression was unreadable, but the woman beside him looked at Clara with barely concealed disdain. "Very well," Grant said. "I have a proposition for you, a job that requires your particular skills." "I'm not for hire anymore," Luke said. "I'm the sheriff here." "Sheriff?" Grant repeated, and there was something mocking in his tone. "How quaint. And yet I think you'll want to hear what I have to offer." The woman dismounted, then moving with practiced grace. Up close, Clara could see she was perhaps 25, with corn silk hair and eyes the color of winter sky. "Forgive my brother's rudeness," she said, her voice cultured and smooth. "I'm Catherine Grant. You must be the famous Clara Carver. We've heard so much about you." "Have you, Clara asked, not liking the way Catherine was looking at Luke like he was a prize bull at auction. "Oh yes, the woman who tamed Luke Carver. It's quite the story back east. The gunfighter turned lawman domesticated by a frontier bride." Catherine's smile didn't reach her eyes. "How romantic." Clara felt her temper flare, but before she could respond, little Tom started crying. She excused herself to take him inside, but positioned herself by the window where she could hear the conversation continue. "I need someone tracked down," Harrison Grant was saying. "Someone who wronged my family. The law can't help, he's beyond their reach. But you could find him." "I told you I'm not—" $50,000, Grant interrupted. "Cash. Enough to set your family up for life. Your wife wouldn't have to worry about you being shot by some revenge-seeking gunman. Your son could go to college back east, have opportunities you never did." Clara saw Luke's jaw tighten. 50,000 was more money than they'd see in a lifetime. It would mean security, comfort, a future without constant danger. "Who's the target?" Luke asked quietly. "A man named William Creed. He seduced my sister, convinced her to steal from our family business, then abandoned her. She took her own life when she discovered he'd used her." Catherine Grant had moved closer to Luke during this explanation, close enough that Clara could see her place a hand on his arm. "Please, Mr. Carver. Luke, you're the only one who can help us." Luke stepped back, breaking the contact. "I need to think about it and discuss it with my wife." "Of course," Harrison said smoothly. "We'll be staying at the hotel. You have until tomorrow night to decide." As the Grants and their entourage rode away, Clara came back outside. Tom settled in his cradle. $50,000, she said quietly. "I'm not taking it," Luke said immediately. "Why not?" "It would secure Tom's future." Luke turned to her in surprise. "You want me to go back to that life?" "I want us to be safe. I want Tom to have choices we never had." Clara sighed. "But I also don't trust them. Did you see how that woman looked at you?" "Catherine. She was just—" "She wants you," Clara said bluntly. "Maybe the brother's story is true, maybe not. But she definitely has her own agenda. Luke pulled Clara close. Even if that's true, it doesn't matter. You're my wife. You and Tom are my life now. I know, Clara said into his chest, but $50,000. That evening after Tom was asleep, they sat at the kitchen table discussing the offer. Luke had made inquiries about William Creed. The man was real, a con artist and thief who'd left a trail of victims across the territories. Maybe this is a chance to do one last bit of good, Luke mused. Bring a criminal to justice and secure our son's future in one action. How long would you be gone? Clara asked. Creed was last seen in Mexico. Could be weeks, maybe months to track him down. Months. Clara repeated the word like it was poison. Months of not knowing if you're alive or dead. Months of raising Tom alone running the school, wondering if every rider on the horizon is bringing news of your death. Clara. No, Luke. We've built something here. We have a life, a good life. Yes, it's dangerous sometimes, but it's ours. Don't let their money tempt you back into darkness. Luke was quiet for a long time. Then, you're right. Tomorrow I'll tell them no. But tomorrow brought complications. Clara was teaching at the school she'd returned part-time, bringing Tom with her in a cradle Rosa had decorated when Catherine Grant walked in. Mrs. Carver, Catherine said, ignoring the children who stared at her fine clothes. Might we speak privately? Clara assigned the older children to help the younger with their letters and stepped outside with Catherine. You don't want Luke to take the job, Catherine said without preamble. What I want is between my husband and me. How provincial. Catherine's perfect features twisted into something less pleasant. You have no idea who Luke really was, do you? What he was capable of. I know exactly who my husband is. Did he tell you about Denver, about the Wallace family? Clara kept her expression neutral, though the names meant nothing to her. Catherine smiled, sensing weakness. He killed 6 men in one night, hunted them down like animals. The youngest was barely 17. They murdered his fiancée, Clara said steadily. Is that what he told you? How romantic. The truth is more complicated. Margaret, that was her name, wasn't it? She wasn't the innocent he's made her out to be. She was involved with those men before she met Luke. When she tried to leave that life behind, they came for her. Her death was as much her fault as theirs. Clara felt rage building in her chest. You're lying. Ask him about the money she stole from them. Ask him about the deals she made before she decided to play respectable. Catherine stepped closer. Luke Carver is a killer, Mrs. Carver. He can dress it up with badges and good intentions, but violence is in his blood. One day that violence will touch you and your son. Unless what? Unless you convince him to take this job. He leaves for a few months, earns enough money to set you up for life, and maybe doesn't come back. You'd be a wealthy widow, free to start over anywhere. Clara slapped her. The sound echoed across the schoolyard, making the children peek through the windows. Catherine touched her reddening cheek, her eyes flashing with anger. You'll regret that, Catherine said coldly. The only thing I regret is not hitting you harder, Clara replied. Get out of my school, get out of our town, and stay away from my husband. Catherine left, but Clara knew this wasn't over. That evening, she told Luke about the encounter. He said those things about Margaret. Luke's voice was dangerously quiet. Is any of it true? Luke was silent for a long moment. Margaret, she had a past. We both did. Yes, she'd been involved with bad people before we met. Yes, she took money from them when she left. Money she felt they owed her for what they'd put her through. But she was trying to change to be better, just like I was. Why didn't you tell me? Because it didn't matter. Margaret's past didn't define her any more than mine defines me, or yours defines you. Clara thought about her own secrets, the violence she'd participated in, the man she'd shot. You're right, the past is past. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Walt, looking grim. Boss, we've got a problem. That fancy fellow Grant, he's been spreading money around town, asking questions about you, about things you did before you became sheriff. What kind of things, ho? Luke asked. The kind that could make folks question whether you should be wearing that badge. He's also been suggesting that maybe the town needs a sheriff who isn't compromised. Luke's face darkened. He's trying to force my hand. There's more, Walt continued reluctantly. He's got legal papers. Says William Creed killed his father, not just ruined his sister. Says it's a matter of family honor now. And if you won't help, he'll hire someone without your scruples. Let him, Clara said. Problem is, Walt said, the someone he's talking about hiring is Jake Morrison. Luke went very still. Jake Morrison was a killer without conscience, someone who enjoyed the violence. If he went after Creed, innocent people would die in the crossfire. I can't let Morrison take this job, Luke said quietly. You can't stop him from hiring whoever he wants, Clara pointed out. No, but I can find Creed first. Luke, no. Clara, if Morrison goes after Creed, he'll burn through anyone in his way. Women, children doesn't matter to him. At least if I go, I can minimize the collateral damage. Clara wanted to argue, but she knew Luke was right. This was no longer about money, it was about preventing a massacre. Then I'm coming with you, she said. Clara, you can't. Tom needs you. Tom needs both his parents, and you need someone watching your back, especially with the Grants involved. Clara's tone brooked no argument. Rosa can care for Tom for a few weeks. The school can manage without me, but you're not facing this alone. Luke started to protest, then stopped. He knew that look in Clara's eyes. She'd made up her mind and nothing would change it. Walt, Luke said finally, you're acting sheriff while we're gone. Can you handle it? Been handling your messes for years, boss. Few more weeks won't kill me. They spent the next day preparing. Clara arranged for the school's management, ensured Rosa had everything she needed for Tom, and tried not to think about the danger they were heading into. Luke gathered information on Creed's last known whereabouts and planned their route. Harrison Grant was smugly satisfied when they told him they'd take the job. I knew you'd see reason, he said, handing over a leather pouch. 5,000, now the rest, when you bring back proof of Creed's disposition. You mean when we bring him back for trial, Luke corrected. Grant's smile was cold. Of course, trial. How civilized. Catherine was there too, her eyes never leaving Luke. I'm coming with you, she announced. No, Luke said flatly. It's not your decision. My brother is paying for this expedition. I go where he sends me. Her smile was predatory. Besides, someone needs to ensure you complete the job. Clara saw Luke about to refuse again and placed a hand on his arm. Let her come, she said sweetly. I'm sure Miss Grant is quite capable of handling the rigors of the trail. Catherine's eyes narrowed, sensing a challenge. I've traveled extensively, Mrs. Carver. I'm not some delicate flower. Good, Clara said. Because where we're going, delicate flowers die. They left at dawn 2 days later, Luke, Clara, Catherine, and 4 of Grant's guards. Tom was too young to understand what was happening, but Clara's heart broke as she kissed him goodbye. We'll be back before you know it, little one, she whispered. The first days on the trail were tense. Catherine had indeed traveled, but traveling in comfort was different from riding hard across rough country. By the 3rd day, her fine clothes were dusty, her perfect hair disheveled, and her complaints constant. How do you stand it? She asked Clara during a rest stop. The dirt, the discomfort, the constant threat of danger. You adapt, Clara said simply. Or you die. Catherine shuddered. And you chose this life. I chose Luke, Clara corrected. The life came with him, but even the hardest life is bearable with the right person beside you. That night they made camp near a small creek. Clara was tending the horses when she overheard Catherine talking to Luke by the fire. She's not what I expected, Catherine was saying. Your wife. What did you expect? Luke asked, his tone carefully neutral. Someone more refined, I suppose. You were always drawn to elegance before. Margaret was quite the lady from what I heard. Clara's hand stilled on the horse's bridle. How did Catherine know so much about Margaret? Clara is worth 10 of any lady I've known, Luke said firmly. Is she? She seems rather common. Pretty enough, I suppose, in a sun-damaged frontier way, but surely you miss the sophistication of your former life. The only thing I miss when I'm away from Clara is Clara, Luke said, standing. If you'll excuse me, I need to check the perimeter. Clara moved away before he could find her eavesdropping, but the conversation troubled her. Catherine knew too much, was too interested in Luke's past. On the 5th day, they reached the border town of Piedras Negras. It was a rough place full of men running from something and women who'd given up running, the kind of place where William Creed might hide. They took rooms at the least disreputable hotel they could find. Clara and Luke in one room, Catherine in another, the guards splitting 2 more. As they settled in, Luke pulled Clara aside. "I need to go make inquiries. Stay here, keep your gun close." "I should come with you." "Someone needs to watch Catherine. I don't trust her." Neither did Clara, but she nodded. After Luke left, she sat by the window watching the street below and thinking about Tom. Was he crying for her? Did he miss her presence, her voice? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Catherine, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "May I come in?" Clara let her enter, hand near her gun. Catherine moved to the window, looking out at the dusty street. "I owe you an apology," Catherine said suddenly. "I've been horrible to you." "Yes, you have." "Why?" Catherine turned, and Claire was surprised to see tears in her eyes. "Because I'm in love with Luke. Have been since I met him years ago in St. Louis. He was there for a job. I was visiting friends. We spent one evening together, just talking, nothing improper, and I've never forgotten him." Clara felt a cold knot in her stomach. "And now I see how he looks at you, and I know I never had a chance. The way he speaks your name, the way his eyes search for you in a room, Margaret never brought that out in him." "You knew Margaret?" Catherine nodded. "We met once briefly. She was beautiful, cultured, everything a man like Luke should want. But there was something cold in her calculating. She loved Luke, I think, but she loved what he could give her: more protection, respectability. A new life." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're different. You actually see him, don't you? Not the gunfighter, not the sheriff, but the man underneath." "I see all of him," Clara said quietly. "The good and the bad, the light and the dark. And I love all of him." Catherine wiped her eyes. "Then you're luckier than you know. And I'm a fool for trying to come between you." Before Clara could respond, they heard gunshots from the street below. Clara was at the window in an instant, Catherine beside her. Luke was in the street facing 3 men. One was already down, the other 2 spreading out to flank him. Without thinking, Clara grabbed her rifle and threw open the window. She fired, dropping the man on Luke's left. Luke's gun spoke, and the man on the right fell. It was over in seconds. Luke looked up at the window, touching his hat brim in thanks. Then Clara saw his expression change to alarm. "Behind you!" he shouted. Clara spun to find one of Grant's guards in the doorway, gun raised not at her, but at Catherine. "Sorry, Miss Grant," the man said. "Your brother's orders." Clara moved without thinking, shoving Catherine aside as the gun fired. Pain exploded through her shoulders, spinning her around and down. She heard Catherine scream, heard another gunshot. Then Luke was there, pulling her into his arms. "Clara, God, Clara, stay with me!" She tried to speak, but darkness was creeping in from the edges of her vision. The last thing she heard was Luke's voice, desperate and afraid, calling her name. Clara woke to pain and the smell of carbolic acid. She was in a bed. Her shoulder heavily bandaged, weak sunlight streaming through a window. Luke was beside her, holding her hand, looking haggard. "Luke?" Her voice was barely a whisper. His eyes snapped to hers, relief flooding his features. "Clara." "Thank God. You've been unconscious for 2 days." "Catherine." "She's fine. You saved her life." Luke's voice broke. "You almost died saving her." "The guard." "Dead. I killed him." Luke's face was grim. "Turns out Harrison Grant never had a sister. The whole thing was a setup. Catherine was bait to lure me out here. Grant is actually working for the Creed family. They wanted me dead because I'd interfered with their operations before." Clara tried to process this. "So William Creed is Harrison Grant. Different name, same man. He's been playing a long game trying to eliminate people who could testify against him for his past crimes." "Where is he now?" "Gone. Disappeared while I was trying to save you." Luke squeezed her hand. "I don't care. Let him run. All that matters is you're alive." The door opened and Catherine entered carrying a tray. She looked different, her fancy dress replaced with simple clothes. her elaborate hairstyle now a simple braid. "You're awake," she said, setting down the tray. "Good. I've been wanting to thank you." "For what?" Clara asked. "For showing me what real courage looks like. For saving my life when you had every reason to let me die." Catherine's eyes were wet. "I was part of the plan at first, Harrison William. Whoever he is, he hired me to distract Luke, maybe even seduce him. But I actually did fall for him, and then I saw you two together, and I couldn't go through with it." "That's why the guard tried to kill you," Luke said. "Grant knew you'd turned." Catherine nodded. "I'm going back east, starting over. Maybe trying to be the kind of woman who would save a rival's life instead of celebrating her death." After Catherine left, Luke helped Clara sit up and take some broth. "We're going home as soon as you can travel," he said. "But Grant is still out there." "I don't care. You almost died, Clara. I'm not risking you again for anything." "Luke, no, I'm done with this life. Done with the violence, the vengeance, the blood. We're going home to our son, and we're going to be boring, respectable citizens if it kills me." Clara smiled weakly. "Somehow I doubt we'll ever be boring." It took another week before Clara was strong enough to travel. They made the journey slowly, carefully, Luke hovering protectively. When they finally saw Culverson on the horizon, Clara nearly wept with relief. Walt met them at the town limits. "Welcome back, boss, Mrs. Carver. We kept the place standing while you were gone." "Any trouble?" Luke asked. "Nothing we couldn't handle. Though young Tom's been giving Rosa fits, boy's got his mother's stubborn streak." They rode straight to the house where Rosa was waiting with Tom. Clara, despite her injury, insisted on holding her son immediately. Tom grabbed at her face with chubby fingers, babbling excitedly. "He missed you," Rosa said, tears in her eyes. "We all did." That night, as they lay in their own bed with Tom sleeping in his cradle nearby, Luke pulled Clara gently against him, mindful of her shoulder. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered in the darkness. "You'll never lose me," Clara promised. "We're survivors, remember, both of us." "No more adventures," Luke said. "No more jobs, no more violence. Just us, our son, our life here." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Luke, violence finds us whether we seek it or not. That's the nature of this land this time. We can't hide from it. Then we face it together, always together." "Always was," Clara agreed. A month passed peacefully. Clara's shoulder healed, though it would always ache when the weather changed, matching Luke's limp. They settled back into their routines, Luke as Sheriff Clara, teaching school and raising Tom. It should have been idyllic, but Clara could see the restlessness in Luke, the way he watched the horizon. Harrison Grant William Creed was still out there, and unfinished business had a way of returning. The reckoning came on a Tuesday afternoon in late summer. Clara was teaching when one of Luke's deputies burst in. "Mrs. Carver, you need to come quick. There's been a shooting." Clara's blood went cold. "Luke, he's alive, ma'am, but injured. And the man who shot him, it's Grant. He's holed up in the saloon with hostages." Clara dismissed the children, grabbed her rifle, and ran for the saloon. A crowd had gathered at a safe distance. She could see Luke propped against a water trough, blood seeping from his side, still conscious but pale. "I'm fine," he said as she knelt beside him. "Bullet went through clean." "Grant," she asked, "inside with 3 hostages. Says he'll kill them unless I come in alone." "You're not going in there." "I have to. Those are innocent people." Clara looked at the saloon, then at her husband. "No, I'm going in." "Clara, no. Listen to me. Grant doesn't really want you dead, or he'd have killed you with that first shot. He wants to prove he's better than you. That means he needs a fair fight, a duel, but you can barely stand." "I won't let you. You won't let me." Clara's eyes flashed. "I'm not asking permission, Luke. I'm saving those hostages and ending this." Before Luke could stop her, Clara stood and walked toward the saloon. "Grant William Creed. Whatever you're calling yourself, I'm coming in to talk." "Mrs. Carver," Grant's voice called out mockingly. "How delightful. Do come in." Clara entered the saloon to find Grant holding a gun on 3 townspeople, including Mrs. Patterson. "Let them go," Clara said. "Your issue is with Luke and me, not them." "Actually, my issue is with the entire notion of justice in this backwards territory," Grant said. Your husband ruined my operations in Colorado. You killed my men here. I think some retribution is in order. Then take it out on me. Let them go, and you and I can settle this." Grant laughed. What could you possibly do to me?" Clara moved so fast Grant barely had time to react. Her rifle came up, and she shot the gun from his hand. As he cried out, clutching his bleeding fingers, she chambered another round and aimed at his head. "I could kill you," she said calmly, "the way you tried to have me killed, but I'm going to give you a choice. Leave now, never come back and live, or stay and die. Choose quickly." Grant looked into her eyes and saw his death there. Clara Carver was no longer the desperate girl who'd fled Red Rock. She was a woman who'd faced death dealt death and come out the other side tempered like steel. "You wouldn't dare," he said, but his voice shook. "You're a school teacher, a mother. I'm also the woman who shot Cole Dixon, who saved Catherine's life even though she was trying to steal my husband, who survived everything you threw at us." Clara's finger tightened on the trigger. "Try me." Grant broke. He ran for the door, cradling his injured hand. "This isn't over," he shouted as he fled. "Yes, it is," Clara said quietly, lowering her rifle. The hostages rushed out, Mrs. Patterson pausing to squeeze Clara's hand. "Thank you, my dear. You've become quite the frontier woman." Clara found Luke being tended by Doc Martinez. "Is it over?" he asked. "It's over. Grant won't be back. Men like him are cowards at heart. They only fight when the odds favor them." That night, as they tucked Tom into his cradle and prepared for bed, Luke pulled Clara close. "You've changed," he said softly. "When we met, you were running scared. Now you're the one doing the protecting." "We've both changed," Clara replied. "Maybe that's what marriage is, two people changing together, becoming what the other needs." "What do you need?" Luke asked. Clara thought about it. "I need to know that our son will grow up safe, that this town will prosper, that we'll grow old together sitting on that porch watching sunsets." "I can't promise life will be safe," Luke said, "but I can promise to face whatever comes with you." As if in response to their conversation, Tom stirred in his sleep, making small sounds. Clara went to him, picking him up gently. The baby opened his eyes, looking up at his mother with Luke's sage-green gaze. "Your daddy and I have quite a story to tell you someday," she whispered, "about how a desperate lie in the desert led to a love neither of us expected." Luke joined them, his arms encircling both wife and son. Outside Culverson slept peacefully the town they protected, the home they'd built. It wasn't the life either of them had planned, but it was theirs, carved out of harsh land with determination, courage, and love. The territory was changing. The railroad was coming, bringing civilization and its complications. There would be new challenges, new threats. But standing there in their modest home, holding each other, and their son, Luke, and Clara Carver were ready for whatever came next. They had started as strangers bound by desperate circumstances. They had become partners forged in violence and tested by fire. Now they were something more, a family, a future, a small piece of hope in a hard land. The girl who had fled Red Rock in terror was gone. The gunfighter who had sought redemption through isolation was gone. In their place stood two people who had learned that sometimes the greatest courage wasn't in facing danger alone, but in trusting someone else to face it with you. As Clara returned Tom to his cradle and joined Luke in their bed, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. Every choice, every danger, every moment of fear and triumph had led to this, a quiet night in a frontier town, safe in the arms of a man she'd chosen and who had chosen her in return. "I love you, Luke Carver," she whispered in the darkness. "And I love you, Clara Carver," he replied. "Thank you for stealing my name that day." Clara smiled against his chest. "Best crime I ever committed." Outside, a coyote howled at the moon, that wild sound that reminded them both of the desert where their story began. But they weren't those desperate people anymore. They were home.